it took me a while to actually get there in the first place.
Yeah, it's sort of just knowing the right level. You don't want it too loud. You don't want it too
Yeah, it's
quiet.
knowing the colours and how high up you can go. I put it up high, so when Ali sees the stuff I edit, Ali's always like, whoa, too loud. But in my mind, I let it go quite high up in the yellow. But that's just Ali just, knowing audio better than I do.
Ali is absolutely insane. I remember the first time I met them in last year, and they're just sort of telling me all these things about the software, about the things that you guys use. Like,
Yeah.
what is it, Myriad and stuff?
Myriad and everything. Ali knows everything, but also a lot of it comes from the intuition of just knowing technology generally. Like, you don't have to know everything. You just have to know generally how you would deal with the scenario.
Right. I see.
And that stuff comes with time. Like, you can't teach intuition when it comes to tech. I mean, Tom Langley's got it. He's got that down now.
Yeah, he's good. He is. He's a good station manager as well.
Oh, he's gonna be fabulous because he loves radio. That's the main thing. Like, he adores radio as a medium, and that's what you need to be a station manager, because it's a hard job. You have to love it.
The station manager role for you guys is harder than it is for presidents of other societies, only because you've got to do so much every single week.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean, you've got to make
It's
sure everything
intense.
is live and keep going sort of thing.
And a lot can go wrong, like as we've seen this year, but even in previous years, a lot can go quite wrong quite quick, and then the buck falls with the station manager, so it's a lot of responsibility.
It is. Will you miss it?
I'm going to miss the station so much. I've been thinking about it. My last show is next week on Thursday, News Hour, final show, and I was telling everyone I'm going to be in pieces, like sobbing.
Oh, I might have to turn up then.
Yeah, because I only started in my second year, so it's not even been that long, really. I mean, 2 years is quite long in my opinion, but it's become such a big part of my life. Like, I'm in the studio pretty much every day. I was, especially during other terms, term 1, term 2, I was always there, and it fills up your time, and you meet amazing people, and that's the thing. I love radio, but it's the people of student radio that make it what it is.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. The people that I've met, everyone I've got along with, everyone is so welcoming and so easy to get along with.
Yeah, and it extends to the other student radio stations. Like, when I've been at conference, everyone I meet at conference, they are just genuinely lovely people who
very
love radio.
passionate. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can't, that sense of community, you can't overvalue that. Like, it means so much, and it's why student radio is possible, because it's a lot of work, but people love the people they do it with. And because you respect your colleagues who you do radio with, that means you're willing to work together and create this amazing output.
Something that you and Tom have created is the News Hour this year.
Yeah.
How have you found doing that? Is that your first time doing it?
We've done News Hour in the past, but Tom and I made a couple of changes to what we've been doing this year. Pretty much a lot of standardization, like making it a little bit more organized. I think that's where we've gone for a lot of things. So, for example, like whoever's hosting, whoever's producing, we swap it. But it's on like a bit of a schedule usually to make it a little bit fairer. We've also sort of changed how the kind of balance of the topics. We're trying to look for more international stories, because we know that we have various members that love an international story, and that's something that's going to get them along. More changes I would say we've made are to X-Focus and an increased use of reports, and we've also done a lot more local interviews and stuff, so like various voices on campus. I've done interviews with the Neurodivergent Disabled Student Society. We got some people to talk student safety. So we had the president of the Feminist Society, we had Pip Shaw, student living officer. So we focused a lot more on that kind of local university content with the interviews, which I think has been really beneficial.
And what have you found yourself discussing?
I mean, I've been trying to look at more of we've been marking a lot of like the classic like months or weeks or these big points of time that you can reflect on the university. So we did a Black History Month special, and we were looking at the University of Exeter as an institution and how it deals with race, and it's actually not the best. We found that there was one black female professor in the whole of the University of Exeter that they'd reported from their stats, and that was something that we discussed. We looked at Disability History Month with the Neurodivergent and Disabled Student Society. God, it's a mouthful, that one. But we talked to them about their experiences on campus and about the guild renovations and how they've worked with the guild to promote these events and what it's the support that is there for them and that kind of thing. And then we were talking about student safety for International Women's Day. I was looking at what does the uni do, what does the guild offer, how can we create a more cohesive response to student safety, specifically for female students, but also just more generally. So I think it's a lot of practical policy stuff rather than just ideas. We've tried to sort of hone in on the actual experience of students, because that's what you want to see reflected in student media, I think.
Yeah, that's really cool. Holy shit, that is... You can also swear, by the way.
Yeah, I'm passionate about the fact that we've been using student media to raise awareness of these things and also have these conversations and get people behind the microphone that wouldn't usually be behind the microphone. Like we had the people in from NDSS and they had such a great time talking to me.
NDSS is
Neurodivergent and Disabled Student Society. Easier to say that one. But we had them in and they had so much to say and they were so willing to share their personal stories as well and their personal experiences. I was like, look, you can say as much or little as you want. But they actually ended up saying quite a lot of stuff because they had these experiences. And I think a lot of students who don't have disabilities wouldn't have seen that side of the university experience. And by having that interview and raising awareness and talking about it, I was hoping to open people's eyes, and I really enjoyed doing that one.
What did you find from these conversations with these people from the NDS?
I found it was a lot that the university does have support, but it's not necessarily always very accessible. It can be quite hard to find. It can be quite hit or miss depending on your department. So there was one student who'd had quite a terrible experience with one personal tutor, but then had a new personal tutor who's absolutely fine. So a lot of it is very dependent on the individual, which in theory is great if you have a great person who's there to support you. But if you don't have that kind of standardization, if not everyone's been trained in the same way, then it's not fair and you can't guarantee. It's like a postcode lottery type thing of who your personal tutor is, whether or not you get support. And I think that idea of training is something that's been reflected in a lot of different things, whether that be disability support, whether that be mental health. That's something, student mental health is a conversation we have all the time on X Focus with Harry's Law. But even outside of that, there have been so many conversations to have been having. And that, I think, is an experience. I mean, personal tutors is something everyone can relate to and everyone's had a positive experience or a negative experience. And to hear how it's differed for people and how they would like that to change, because not only did they have issues like that they raised, but they also had recommendations about how students could better be supported. One student who does psychology was talking about a psychology lecturer who provided like fidget toys and made it possible for people to leave rooms if they needed to, and was like, this is the kind of practice that we should be emulating elsewhere. So these students have experienced these things, and because of their experiences, they know what works and what doesn't, and that's why it's so important to listen to the student voice.
How do you think that would carry and transition over into the work environment?
I think
does that question make sense?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. So sort of like the kind of accommodation side of things.
Yeah, I think because it could be quite hard to be very accommodating at university, and then when you're so used to that, like that safety bubble, then you go out into the real world and you realise it's
not always like that.
It's stressful. It's hard work, it's you're saving money, etc., sort of thing.
Well, this is something I've seen. I mean, I've spent quite a lot of time researching these kind of issues because it's something that I'm interested in personally. But I think there are various workplaces that are trying to be more accommodating, and also there is just the suitability of certain industries or jobs for certain people. So I've seen people on social media talking about how they just can't work in certain jobs because it just doesn't suit them for whatever reason. You know, a classic job for someone our age who needs part-time work might be waitressing. It might be being a bartender, but that doesn't work for everyone. If you're someone who's incredibly sensitive to sort of noise and sound and lights, you can't have an accommodation for that in a bar because the bar is going to be loud, there's going to be music and there's going to be people. So that already limits these individuals to the kind of part-time work they can find. So in terms of like workplaces, there's that narrowing of what you can and can't access. But I think in the adult world, the world is becoming more accommodating in a lot of ways, more understanding. I think the biggest problem is in a lot of workforces is the accommodations aren't there until you ask for them. People don't just automatically do them or see them. It takes someone in a wheelchair who can't open a door. It takes someone with autism who's feeling overstimulated. It takes someone getting to a bad point to fix the problem of the accommodation. And that's the biggest issue. But on the flip side, how do you train people who've never experienced these things to look out for them? Like, I'm all for the empathy and the understanding, but I've never been in a wheelchair. So I don't see the world from a wheelchair user's perspective. And therefore, I can't necessarily imagine the issues they're going to have. And I also don't personally want to speak for someone who is a wheelchair user or who has another disability that I don't have. I don't want to tell them what they do and don't need because I'll be speaking for them. So the ideal world, I would say, is that you have systems that listen to people with disabilities and then does what is asked of them and give them that space to raise the issue and make it in a welcoming space and that you're actually going to be responsive, but listen to what they specifically need. But in that vein, be quick with it. Yeah. You can tell I'm a politics student. You can tell I'm a politics student.
Yeah, and you're very good at talking. You're very
Thank you. I mean, I spend all of my time talking. Literally, that is pretty much all I do. But I enjoy it, so. Do
you remember the first time you actually went on air or your first show?
Yeah.
And how and what it was like? like
I
compared
was
to now?
terrified, absolutely terrified. It would have been in my second year, fairly early on in my second year, maybe like Freshers Week, week one, and I went to, it would have been X Focus or News Hour. I can't specifically remember. I'd have to listen back, but I remember I don't think I spoke. I had a microphone, but I was just too terrified to say anything because it's quite an intimidating thing going on air if you've never done it before. Like the idea that you are speaking and people are hearing you, but you can't see them, you can't see that response. I've grown up doing a lot of debating, which is public speaking in the way that radio might be public speaking. But in a room, I can see how people are reacting to what I'm saying when I'm debating. But on the radio, you don't know how they're reacting. And if you're not comfortable behind the microphone, not everyone is. I mean, it's something I've had to build up over time. But I remember I was absolutely terrified, and I don't think I said anything substantial even. I mean, it took me a couple of weeks to like actually build up to saying like a point. But I quickly developed like a reputation for speaking on certain issues. So like I mean, there's a big problem in student radio and especially in news, but it tends to be quite male dominated, especially the people who tend to be louder. So we talk about, you know, feminist issues and women's issues that would come up. And, you know, I would usually be last year, it would be Vicky, and she'd say something. And then everyone else would go quiet because they didn't really know what to say. So I was like, right, it's my turn. And then I'd go into like a 2-3 minute long speech. And then everyone was like, yeah, sounds good. Because no one was like willing to disagree with me on that kind of thing.
Do you think they were scared to disagree?
I think so. I think I can be quite intimidating sometimes because I am quite direct with what I say, especially when it comes to the radio. When I have a point, I'm going to say that point and I'm going to be pretty clear with it. But also, there are issues that I've not felt comfortable speaking on. And that goes the same with anyone. Everyone has issues that they don't want to touch or that they don't know much about.
Yeah, I think it's also like, I can't speak for women, you can't speak for men sort of thing, etc., etc.
And it doesn't even have to just be like those kind of touchy things. Like there have been, you know, issues to do with like specific parts of international politics, or occasionally we've spoken about sports on the news show and I go, right, I'm sitting this one out because I don't tend to know much about it. But that's why we try, when we have news shows and stuff, we try to have that broad range of topics so that there's something that you can chime in on. And I try, when I ask my questions when I'm hosting, I try to have a range of questions that you might, if you've done loads of research and know it in depth, you can ask those questions, you can answer that, you can talk about that. But even if you just want to give like your personal opinion briefly on the headline, also that as well. Yeah. Damn. Yeah, I know. You thinking now?
I am thinking now.
He's thinking what to ask.
Yeah, it's not really an interview though. It's just a
conversation.
Chat. Yeah, I don't want this to feel like I'm interrogating you or
No, I don't feel interrogated.
interviewing you.
I'm used to be the person who's doing the interviewing as well. So for me, it's quite funny.
Yeah,
Although,
you do your intro, don't you?
Yeah, I have my own show, Land of the Free. It's an American politics show that I've had since about this time last year. So I've had a year of it now, and I will be continuing it on after I leave Exeter. Because
would that just be like with Audacity on your laptop or something, and a
yeah,
microphone?
so I'm quite lucky that my dad has like at home. My dad's got a pretty professional mic set up. He works from home, so he needs these things for meetings, and he's so willing to let me use it. So I have a pretty good setup. I pay for the student Adobe Audition. It's like 16 quid a month, but I find it's been worth it because I edit all of our expression stuff from home, and I also edit my own stuff. So I'll be doing that at home. But next year when I'm doing my masters, I'm going to have access to a podcast studio kind of like this one.
That's really cool.
A pretty professional one with like a media wall and the camera set up and stuff. So I've been told that I can use that for personal projects. So that's my intention. But because Land of the Free is like my little baby, and it was all the segments and everything, it's my idea. And although I've had guests on 1 or 2 times, it's usually just me talking for about an hour, which I enjoy because I love American politics and I would literally talk about that, till the end of time.
How comes? What is it about American politics?
I mean, I started being fascinated, you could say possibly A-level politics, because I did A-level politics, and we did American politics and that. But even before then, I was interested. I think part of it was I watched this TV show called The West Wing. It's an absolutely amazing TV show.
Who's in it? I think I've heard of it.
There's a couple of big actors. One of my favourites in it is Alison Janney. And the TV show is about this fictional president in America called President Bartlet, and it's about like his administration. And it's old now. It was old at the time, and I remember I watched it with my parents. I started it a little bit before lockdown, but we watched the whole thing during COVID, and we had the whole like DVD box set that we watched, and I just fell in love with the show, and then also American politics because as it's quite an optimistic TV show, so it's about a Democratic president who is actually quite liberal and has these quite liberal ideas, which seems kind of rogue to us right now because that's not really been the case for a while. But the show is just absolutely, I would say, inspiring in a lot of ways. And I just fell in love with the system as well. So what I love about politics is a lot of the time the institutions, and I find that kind of stuff interesting, like how the Supreme Court works, how Congress passes laws, all of that kind of stuff I am a big fan of. And American politics has a lot of that. It has a lot of institutions. But I think that's when I first fell in love with it. And then I studied it at A-level and found it really interesting. And my A-level politics teacher loved American politics, so he had like a real passion for it, which helped. And then I just sort of carried on being very engaged with it and studying it.
Do you find yourself going over there anytime soon?
I would love to. Like, my dream job would be to be like a North America editor or like a North America reporter or something for a broadcast outlet, whether that be BBC or Channel 4 or even like one of the American ones. I would love to do American political reporting because that combines literally all my interests. And I think it would just be like a job that is so interesting, literally non-stop interesting.
Not like a politician at all?
No, I mean, this is a classic thing. So when you study politics like I do, everyone always goes, oh, so you want to be a politician? And I always used to go, no. And I mean, yeah, I've considered it. But for me, politics is so much wider than just going into parliament or anything like that. Politics is the whole world around that. And that's what I think people don't necessarily understand. It's not just the people you elect in parliament. It's your local councillors, it's the civil servants, it's the judges and the judicial system and the lawyers. It's teachers who teach politics. It's people who literally work in the public sector. You've got like doctors, nurses, they are all engaged in politics because they are working in the public sector. And it's so much broader than you think. I mean, you have like the actual physical policies and the outcomes that we see, but it's also these ideas of what kind of world do we want to live in? What values do we want to have? Do we want to support democracy? Do we want to have these like liberal freedoms like press freedom, freedom of speech? Politics literally touches every aspect of people's lives and you don't even realize that it's happening. And I think the way that we discuss politics as a society tends to be in a much narrower sense of like elections and voting, and that's about it. But politics is so much more than that, and I think that's one of the biggest common misconceptions.
I think political history is quite interesting as well.
I loved it.
Because it can make you very more appreciative of the society that we're part of today.
Yeah, very much so. I studied a lot of history, like I did history at A-level, and I love history, but it was always the political side of history that interested me.
Because Ian Dunn, I don't know if you've heard of the name.
I've heard of the name, yeah.
He released a book a couple of years ago called How to Be a Liberal, and it sort of like looks at liberalism throughout history sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it looks at anti-liberal values. So obviously the 20th century, earlier 20th century was
a lot of that.
A lot of that. And it when you really look at it from our point of view and realise that we've never grown up in that sort of thing, as far as I'm aware, we're very, very lucky.
Yeah, and even university can open your eyes in a lot of those ways. So over this past weekend, I was in Germany doing a Model United Nations conference, and I was speaking to someone, and she's from Egypt, but she studies in Germany. And we were talking about, so in Germany they've got, in the European Union, upcoming European Parliament elections, and we were talking. And she was telling me that she's never voted before. And I was like, what do you mean you've never voted? You study politics. You're politically engaged. What do you mean you've never voted? And she was like, in Egypt, it's just not the same. They don't have that level of political, education or awareness in the population. She was like, I couldn't even name the parties. I couldn't name the main politicians. I wouldn't know how to go and vote, wouldn't know how to register. And this is someone who studies politics and is actually interested in this kind of thing. But just because of the way that her society works, it doesn't value necessarily that level of democracy and engagement, that she's never done it. And like that blew my mind quite a bit.
Having conversations with people as well from other countries and like their political beliefs is, it definitely does.
Yeah.
Broaden your understanding of the wider world. That's weird.
Yeah. And there was we've been talking about other political issues like Israel, Gaza, all of this. We'd been talking about like the European Union, because whenever you speak to Europeans these days, they're always talking about Brexit, and it's annoying, but whatever. We did it. That's happening. We talk about it. But like when you have these conversations, you just like, wow, there is a different world out there in other countries, even if even America, right? That system, we assume, and this is one of my biggest pet peeves, is we assume America is so like us as a country because we see American media, whether that be music, TV, film, whatever. We see it and we think, oh, we're kind of similar. We speak the same language. But like culturally, completely different. The political system could not be more different. The fact that they have a codified constitution and ours is uncodified is just one example. But we assume that they're the same, and therefore we assume that we always have the same values. But that's very much not the case.
I've heard that their parties are much more right-leaning than ours. Even the Democratic Party is more like that. I think my friend says it's centre-right to right-wing. compared to our Labour Party.
Literally, yeah. My A-level politics teacher, when we were doing this, studying American politics, he like got a graph up, and it was like, and it was based on policies, like it was based on the proposed policies of the parties. And he's like, if you look at it, you have the Republican Party, which is even more to the right of the Conservative Party. This was a couple years ago, so it might have changed a little bit since then, but even more to the right. And then you have the Labour Party, and then you sort of, on the level below, you had others that were just, the Democratic Party is not the same as the Labour Party. The Labour Party is more left-wing. Today you could debate that a little bit more. In theory, the Labour Party is more left-wing than the Democratic Party, but we assume that they're the same. So their whole system has shifted to the right, and also in the past, their parties were more like broad churches, so they contained more different views within them, whereas because of various things, our parties tended to be a little bit more together and cohesive on issues. But these things are all relative, right? And they change over time, so you can say these things. But the other fact is, although we are both two-party systems, in the UK, we are less of a two-party system than they are. Like, they really don't have any others. They may have names and they have a Green Party, but it's not the same.
I've heard there's like the Communist Party over there or something like
it's
that.
It's not the same. They don't have, they don't get elected. Like, the House of Representatives and the Senate, apart from a handful of independents in the Senate, they are Democrats and Republicans. That is it. Whereas here, it's Labour and Conservatives, but you have the SNP, you do have the Lib Dems, you have the Greens, you have, in the various regions, you've got Sinn Féin, whatever,
Reform,
DUP. You have these other people that are competitive in a certain way. So that, I think, is another area of difference.
Yeah, what are your thoughts to Sunak announcing the 4th of July general election?
Oh my gosh. So I woke up yesterday morning, and I was on my phone, and I was on X, which is where I spend a lot of my time, because that's where politics discussions happen.
I'm going to ask you about that as well.
Yeah.
But I'll let you finish.
So I was on X, and I was seeing all of because I follow a lot of journalists. So I was seeing all of these journalists going, there's talk. These people were saying, look, we don't want to raise the alarm, and we're not saying definitely anything's going to happen, but there are certain things that were happening that usually happen when a big announcement is coming. So like Chris Mason from the BBC was saying that the people who would usually call and phone up, they weren't responding to the phone. Civil servants were starting to be a bit panicked, and there were all these reports. Jeremy Hunt was supposed to be on ITV, but he cancelled his ITV visit. David Cameron was supposed to be flying to another country, but he cancelled his flight. So everyone was like, oh, wow, something big is coming. And then as the day progressed, you got closer and closer. People like, okay, right, there's an announcement coming after the cabinet meeting, and everyone was like, right, it's an election. And even up until then, you could have been like, is it? But then everyone started reporting it. You even had the BBC, who were quite cautious with what they report. And they were going, it's a general election. I mean, I was not expecting it. Like, I woke up yesterday not thinking that we were going to end the day knowing when a general election was going to be. For me, it felt like it came out of nowhere. And I think that is a shared belief between a lot of people who are like, why has this happened now?
Yeah, I think from what I've seen on YouTube from what is it? Not feedback, reactions to it is they're surprised it's so soon for Sunak, because they thought it would be like late autumn, November time sort of thing.
They were trailing an autumn election for months. They've been saying that everyone's been preparing for autumn, and like everyone, even a load of Conservative MPs, including my own MP from back home, they've been taken back because they're standing down, and they hadn't announced it yet because they thought they had more time to announce it, but there's been a handful of announcements because they're not standing, and everyone was like, oh my God, it's happening. And it took everyone by surprise, and that's not necessarily popular within the Conservative Party that he's just gone ahead and done it when everyone was sort of preparing for an autumn election. Because then you also have more time for campaigning, you have more time to sort out listen to your constituents, feel like you have time to campaign there.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. Do you know what? That actually shoots you in the foot. But I think the funny word of consensus is that people really think Sunak just wants to sort of throw in a towel sooner.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to get better, is it? The situation isn't going to improve massively.
I think we all know who's going to win.
The polling it's saying Keir Starmer, and unless there is a major event that completely changes everything, and you can never say no to that in politics because anything can happen, but it's not going to be a Rishi Sunak win. And I think he does know that. I mean, he's going to fight the election because you're going to fight the election. But also, and this is something the Conservative Party's been talking about, they need to, what some people say, they need to go and hide in opposition. They need a bit of time to themselves, out of the limelight, to figure out what they actually stand for, what they believe in, how they're going to go and operate in the future, what side of the party is going to dominate. They need that time to question themselves as a political entity because they are clearly at a time of failure. And to get back to a level of success, you need to have a certain kind of cohesive identity that they just don't have right now.
What do you think the biggest failures were of the Conservative Party? Do you think I think what comes on my mind is probably their response to COVID.
Response to COVID is a big one. Austerity that happened following the global financial crash. I think that we have been consistently seeing the problems with austerity, and that impacted and intersected with COVID. So these cuts to public services, including the health service, became very clear when it was the COVID-19 global pandemic and the NHS was on its knees, so to speak. It became obvious that the NHS wasn't being funded and organised in a way that was very effective to deal with these bigger issues. And I think austerity and the cuts to public services is something that a lot of people can individually relate to. And the biggest thing, and this is just generally about politics, is people vote for the economy. They vote with the money in their pocket that they do or don't have. Right now, people aren't doing particularly well off. There's a cost of living crisis. People's mortgage prices have been increasing. People's rents have been going up. And people are going to associate that with the Conservative Party, specifically Liz Truss, but more broadly the Conservative Party, and go, well, I would like some more money. Who do I think is going to support money and my quality of life? And if it's not been the Conservatives, well, the other option really for us to try is Labour. And although it's been quite a while since Labour was in office, and although it ended quite badly towards the end because you had the whole global financial crash and Gordon Brown's response, up until that point, they were quite popular. They'd been doing good things. They'd improved people's lives in a lot of ways. You had the changes to schooling, the Sure Start centres, all of these different little policies that added up and had consequences, positive consequences for people's lives. And I think if they can look back to 1997, not everyone will be able to, because like us, we weren't alive. But for people that can, you think, damn, maybe it was a little bit better back then.
Really?
I think so. I mean, it was different, and not all of the Conservative Party policies have been bad. I'm not going to say they've completely failed on every front, but they have consistently gotten things wrong and misunderstood the public mood or what the public think. And I would say that kind of undermines the public in a lot of ways. I think the Conservative Party have underestimated what people think and are willing to talk about and what actually matters to them. So one big example of this, right, is the culture war that is going on that we're always talking about. I think the Conservative Party think the culture war is a much bigger thing than it actually ends up being. If you were to go to speak to an ordinary person on the street about what really matters to them, they're going to say the economy, they're going to say education, maybe they're going to say healthcare or immigration.
Their families, their friends.
They're not going to go,
sort of thing.
Oh, my biggest issue right now is transgender rights. That is not going to be the general response you're going to get. The idea of woke and the rainbow lanyards, that is not something that the individual, the average person cares about. The average person cares about their job and their security and their financial happiness. And I think to assume that the culture wars are a bigger thing than they actually have been has been quite damaging.
Well, a big thing that plays into this is the social media algorithms. It's funny because you mentioned, I was going to ask you earlier about your use of Twitter and how, I don't know how the hell you do it.
Yeah.
Using something that's so goddamn toxic.
Yeah.
You know. Are you very aware that what you're being pushed can be quite algorithmic sort of thing? Or is yours quite balanced?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's balanced, but I wouldn't say it's toxic. Like a lot of the stuff I see, because I tend to follow a lot of politics accounts and journalists, that's usually what I'm seeing. And I think because that tends to be on a little bit more of the mainstream side. But I know that the negative stuff is very much out there. So there's a journalist who I quite admire who works at the BBC. Her name's Mariana Spring. She's the BBC's disinformation and social media correspondent. And I've read her book, I've listened to her podcast series. I think her work is really interesting, specifically because it looks at trolling and it looks at social media. And there have been times that I've gone onto her Twitter account to see what she's doing. When I'm looking at her Twitter account, I'm seeing these awful replies that are saying things from quite a lot of conspiracy accounts, that kind of thing. But some of what they say is like criticism of the BBC. Some of what they say is absolutely abhorrent and disgusting. The misogyny, the sexism, the death threats, rape threats that these people will publicly post, and they don't get taken down, because that's the big thing that's happened recently on X, is the fact that there's a lot less security in that sense. And that world does exist, and I think some people can be drawn into it, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily publicly facing in the way that a lot of people say it is. Like, social media can be toxic. I am definitely in agreement. But I think you have to find your way to the toxic bit. And gradually, I think we're more and more pushing people there. The longer you spend on these social media sites, they need your engagement. How do you engage people? You put in extreme content in front of them, and that evokes a response.
Yeah, you remind them what they like, that sort of thing. They keep getting engaged into it, which is a shame. I think from personal experience, the more social media usage I've had, the worse I felt off. Weird enough. But yeah, I can respect the fact that you can use it, especially Twitter.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the most positive for places, but like for political journalists in particular, it's so important. Like that's why I was seeing all of these election rumors yesterday, is because I'm following these people on Twitter and it's coming up and everyone's having this conversation. And because it can be quite immediate and come up with these, you know, put these people in contact and push these discussions, that's why it's a very valuable tool for journalists. And that's why I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon.
No, I don't think you could see anything that could ever replace it.
No,
No.
because I mean, Instagram tried, right? They
Was that Threads,
created
right?
Threads. I didn't even create a Threads account because I didn't see the point. And also, there was a thing that if you delete your Threads account, then it also deletes your Instagram account. I believe in the terms and conditions, but I'm not fully certain. But I read that, so I was like, well, I'm not going to do that because what if I want to delete this account in the future? But even Threads hasn't taken off. Like we don't hear people talking about what was said on Threads. It
What
was
is
a
Threads?
thing. Yeah,
Like,
it was.
no,
Like,
I'm not joking. I'm
it's
genuinely.
literally like Twitter on Instagram. Like it was the concept of Twitter, like text posting in short form ish, but through Meta and their platforms. But it didn't end up being. I mean, they launched it, but it wasn't. It's not lasted as a popular thing because Twitter and X have become so embedded in culture. It's become a thing that we talk about and use.
Well, I mean, you got to do it, haven't you? You got to use it if you have to.
Yeah, there are a lot of things you have to use these days. Like it's hard to stay away from a lot of them. I mean, some of them are more like personal, like Instagram. You know, I wouldn't want to stop using Instagram because it is a great way to keep up to date, you know, with my friends. And like, I've just been away in Germany. I've made loads of new friends. I want to see what they're doing with their lives. I want to, you know, keep up to date with them on Instagram. My home friends who I don't see when I'm at uni, I want to know what they're doing. But then I appreciate that not everything you see on Instagram is great. A lot of the toxic body image type stuff, that can be incredibly negative, and I think for younger people especially, it can be very damaging.
Yeah, it's. I think the scariest one that I've seen is ones that promote toxic environments in like gyms and fitness cultures and stuff. Because from what I've experienced, fitness cultures, gym communities are some of the best places to be in. I think you see that one arsehole, and it's you never really see it in person. If you know what I mean. Have you ever seen that sort of thing?
I've seen parts of it. I mean, I've ended up on some fairly right-wing, like Instagram Reels sides of stuff because I tend to watch it and I'm like, gosh, what is happening here? But I've seen that kind of stuff and the toxic masculinity side of it and the disrespect for women. Obviously, that's not everyone that goes to the gym, clearly. But these accounts use the fact that they're gym accounts. They use that as their in, and then they're promoting this negativity. They're not really gym accounts in a lot of ways. They're being sexist, but they dress it up in these various ways to make it more, to make it more acceptable to lure these young men in a lot of ways, insecure young men who are going through tough times, you know, adjusting to secondary school or going through puberty. That can be really difficult for a lot of people, and then they take advantage of that vulnerability, and then they draw them into this sort of like alt-right pipeline. Is a classic discussion of that.
Do you think Andrew Tate's character of this?
I would say it was a big thing like last year, and it's the younger. It's not people our age really that I'm concerned with. I mean, some of them obviously agree with what Andrew Tate says, but the problem is when it's younger boys, when it's boys who are like 10 to 14 years old, because you're really susceptible to a lot of things at that time, and because you're going through it and life is tough and you might be falling out with friends and you want to fit in, that's when they're vulnerable. And also that's when you're forming a lot of your views on the world. Like that's when you're first starting to see how you interact with the world for the first time and your place in the world. And if you have a guy online telling you women belong in the kitchen, women should go back home, they're taking your jobs, women should be there to support you and look after you, you deserve all of these things. Well, yeah, I can see how you probably would believe that. And it can have these far-reaching negative consequences.
Well, an extreme example of how easy it is to sort of blind the youth to ideology is you've got to go back to the 20th century, like we were speaking about earlier, with Nazis, with Nazi stuff.
And they started them young, and they were talking about these ideas, and they believe it. And then in the Soviet Union, it's the same thing. You had these kids who were reporting their parents for saying these negative things about the regime.
That's
because you teach them that if you hear that at home, you come and tell us. I mean, that's very 1984, the idea of kids reporting on their parents. And the idea is that you get kids young enough and then they support the regime. And also the fact is they grow up and they carry on believing that. You get the youth in because they're going to last longer, they're going to live longer, and they're going to then support these ideas. And I think that's why young people's politics is something that I'm very interested in. I've studied it before and I'm very passionate about it. That's why we need to have these conversations about how we talk to young people about politics, because they're going to find out about it. They're going to have to engage in the political world, but it's how we support them when they're doing that, how we can help them make a choice that they actually believe in and not lead them somewhere that's very important.
Yeah, you need to be very careful with how we're treading with this. I mean, it's easier said than done, of course. Like, how do you think we could approach that?
So one of the things that's supposed to be in place right now is like compulsory political education for young people in schools. There is a law that was signed. We're supposed to be doing that. But we're not doing that as a country because you have this focus on exams and GCSEs and results, and you don't have timetabled hours, and you don't have paid teachers to be talking about politics. And also because we expect teachers to be unbiased, and teachers take that as we can't ever talk about politics, which can be tricky because you can talk about politics without being biased. So we need proper comprehensive political education in schools, as in built into the curriculum from quite a young age, going, what is our political system? How do we work? How do we vote? What is a local council? What does a local council do? What is a general election? What does it mean for me? There's kind of like practical sides of politics we can teach them quite young because they can understand that. You can understand a bit of procedure. You can understand what your local MP does at a fairly young age. And then you can get into these are the different issues that we can discuss, whether that be the environment, whether that be mental health. You can bring up these key topics and let them explore their ideas within that, but raise them as the issues. Because you obviously can't tell what to think. You can't say this is a good view, this is a bad view. But you can raise the issues and the debates that we're having and say, look, if you want to participate in these discussions, here are some talking points, here are some things you might want to consider, and give young people the tools to have the conversations.
Yeah. How do you think you'd see this sort of progress, people's views and stuff in the next 10 years, 10, 15 years?
I mean, I think if we had better political education, we'd have better engagement. So that's the first thing. More young people would be engaged in the basic parts of democracy, like voting. Maybe they'd also be more engaged in joining political parties and having a membership. So you'd have more participation. You'd also have more engaged participation. People wouldn't just vote for the parties that their parents vote for or that they've heard about. People would make actual critical decisions based on what they believe and what their values are and what they'd like to see done. So it would have that kind of more informed decision. And then you've got like that's the practical consequences. But then you have like the idea of society and the fact that that's good for society because we want to belong together. We want to have a community, and that requires conversing and talking. And how do you achieve that is through these political discussions.
And I think one of the best things about having political discussions is that you can find people who can have different political, affiliations, but also you can get along really well.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. I think a big concern of mine would always be being caught in an echo chamber.
Yeah.
We're talking about like Andrew Tate and stuff and the things of incels. The thing with incels is I actually look at that and I don't find it that funny. I find it quite sad.
Yeah.
In a way, like there's like documentaries that I think Channel 4 or E4 did, and it was actually very depressing and very sad to see men in this state, missing out on some of the most beautiful things that could be like a relationship, for example.
No, I think it's terrible. And I think obviously they are the perpetuators of hate and violence in some ways, but they are also victims, right? You can be both at the same time. They're victims of a system that has taken advantage of them at a weak time and that has sold them a life that isn't real. It's sold them something that just doesn't exist. This idea that, men can be on top and you deserve these things and you're owed these things. That's not how the world works, but they don't necessarily know that. And that's what is sad, is that there's always someone above them, right? Taking advantage type thing. It's not the individual person necessarily who's sending this hate that's, you can't say, oh my God, you're the worst person in the world, you're the reason for all these problems. No, that person is just like a foot soldier in a lot of ways. They're following something that someone else has said, and that's why you have to sort of trace it all the way up. But then that's hard because dismantling the stuff at the top is really hard, right? But it's easier to come after an individual account and tell them off or block them or whatever.
Have you ever been, I wouldn't say a victim, but more, have you ever had hate ever directed towards you or been on the other side of it,
Never online, not really. I mean, I've been very online and on social media for years. I was very present on social media when I was a lot younger, maybe too young in certain ways, but it was quite important for me to find that sense of community. But I've never really engaged in those kind of areas that have a lot of hate, and I've never really received it. I mean, I don't particularly post a lot of stuff publicly because I'm concerned about digital footprints and stuff. And now that I'm looking at getting a job, I wouldn't post my political views online, but I've seen a lot of it. And I think I'm very aware of it because of the various communities and online communities that I've been in the past, and I've seen it happen, but I've never really participated in it. And I'm glad that I've never received it. And also, I'm proud of myself for never having sent it, because it can be easy sometimes if you have an argument with someone online, right? It can be easy.
Your
to
ego
be like,
gets involved. You're like, oh, fuck you. And you just send something.
It's so easy to do that when you get worked up, and like it's so much easier to say those things online than in real life. That's what everyone says, right? So much harder to say something to someone's face when you're anonymous behind the screen. It's easy. So that's why it can become quite high stakes quite quickly.
Oh shit! I was going to ask you something. You mentioned something that was actually quite digital footprint. That was it.
Digital footprints.
Yeah. Do you not think though, like regardless of what you post, people could always be able to find what you do and who you are?
They can, and I'm very good at it. I'm very good at social media stalking. It's one of my biggest talents. I mean, I'm an investigative journalist when it comes to social media. I'm good at finding people's accounts when I'm not supposed to.
How deep of a dive have you gone on someone?
Oh, okay.
You don't name the person, of course,
no.
because then it gives it away.
Yeah, so this is my GCSE French teacher. I found her MySpace account back when we were in school, and MySpace is like dead and buried, right? Like it's a social networking site, and I found that. I found that a lecturer had like another side of their like personal life that they'd like never alluded to. You'd never expect they were a lecturer, that they would be a DJ on the weekends, but I managed to find a lecturer's like DJ account, which was quite funny. So those kind of things, but these are all like public accounts, right, type thing. And it's not, if you know how to look at these things, like I had like a PE teacher when I was in secondary school be like, can you try and find my Facebook account just so I know how like secure it is from people? And I was like, give me a couple of minutes. And I was able to find it. And I was like, right, you should like change these kind of things. But that's just because I've grown up online and I know like how to find these things and what you're searching for and the tips and tricks. But digital footprint is something that I'm concerned about as someone who wants a job in a pretty public-facing industry, right? I mean, we didn't really talk about that when I was like first getting Instagram and stuff at like 12, 13. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I'm not the happiest with isn't necessarily attached to my name. It's not bad stuff, like it's not rude, it's just embarrassing, really. But it's not necessarily attached to my name at all. So it's quite tricky to find that kind of thing. But
what do you mean by embarrassing? Do you mean like photos of you as a kid posted by your mum and your pet dad?
I used to have like a lot of fan accounts back in the day. So many. That was a big thing for me. So many of those that were quite cringe in a lot of ways. But then I don't regret any of it because that's how I found a lot of friends. It was a sense of community that was really important for me growing up. But a lot of that kind of cringe stuff. I mean, and a lot of the things that they say about like internet security, even we were having those conversations when we were at school, but I still like didn't follow it. They were like, never talk to strangers online. And I consistently spoke to strangers online. I mean, I never gave them like my address or anything like that. I wasn't absolutely ridiculous. But I was like, why wouldn't I speak to these people online and make friends? Like,
they must seem really friendly sort of thing, don't they? Yeah.
And I had there are internet friends that I still have on social media that I will talk to occasionally, people that I never met when I was like 13, 14. With these kind of fan accounts type stuff, and those connections have actually lasted many years, and every so often we'll talk, and that would be kind of nice. And I wouldn't have got that if I was like, well, I'm never going to speak to anyone online. But on the flip side, you do have to be very careful when you're doing those kind of things.
What were your fans or fan accounts of? Because I used to have a fan account of one, and it was like a character from a video game. Yeah. And I remember that's how I actually talked to people at my secondary school. Yeah. And I'd see this picture of like this cartoon character, and I know what you mean by the cringe. You look back, you're like, why the fuck was I doing that?
Yeah, so I had a couple of Dan and Phil fan accounts back in the day.
Somewhat.
Dan and Phil, the YouTubers.
Dan and Phil, not heard of them.
That's so funny. So Dan and Phil were these two British YouTubers that had quite a big fandom back in the day, and I loved Dan and Phil, so I was very involved in that. I had a couple of like more general accounts, so that I would like be fans for various things. I used to like quite quickly go from what I was a fan of quite quickly, like I would change fairly quick. So I'd have to like update all these accounts and everything. The most embarrassing one, and I think it's funny, like I told most of my uni friends about this. This is the big one, is that I had like a Call the Midwife fan account, and that's how I've met a lot of these friends. Call the Midwife, you know, that BBC show that's on a Sunday night at 8 p.m. that's about midwives in the 1950s and 60s.
Is that still going?
Yeah, it's still going. And there was quite a core group of us back in the day on Instagram, and then later on Twitter, really. And that was like a big part of my teenage years, was being a fan of that show, which is quite funny when you think back on it. And it was cringe.
But you said you don't regret it, which is nice, because...
No, I don't regret it.
I think it's good that you look back on it with cringe as well, because it's sort of showing how much you've grown as a person.
Yeah.
Like, I always say to people, when you look back at your past and you've done shit that makes you cringe so much, I think that's a good sign that you've grown, because
definitely.
some things you probably do when you're younger like when you do now, you
Never
don't
have done
realize.
that. But also, like, it was really important for me at the time. So, like, this was when I was like 13, 14, 15 maybe. And this is when I was like realizing that I was gay, and having this online community of people who were going through similar things was really important for me. And I remember it was what really got me into it was this lesbian couple on the show. And it was being able to see that and see myself being reflected in media that I'd literally never had before. And I'd had that like in a mainstream BBC show nonetheless. And that was the biggest thing that like got me involved in this community. And there were lots of us that felt the same way, like a good group of us, like young queer girls at like 12, 13, 14. And the fact that we didn't, there weren't people like us at school, but there were like people like us online, and we could have these conversations and relate to one another. And that was very important.
I mean, you don't have to answer this question, but what was it like sort of finding out that you were gay and stuff?
It was
If that's not too much of a personal question.
I'm very willing to talk about these kind of things. My memories of when I was younger are quite spotty, just generally. I'm someone with an absolutely terrible memory. But I remember when I first started, it was the classic thing. You have a sort of a crush on your best friend. And I was like, oh my God, I have a crush on Lucy, who was my best friend at the time. So I realised I liked girls before I realised I didn't like guys. That's pretty much how it went. And I felt quite alone at school. I mean, I had a couple of friends, luckily, who were bi at the time, and we had like a little group of us, and we talk about these things, a group of maybe 3 or 4 of us. And that was quite nice because I did have people I could relate to and speak about these things with, but they didn't necessarily understand everything because they were bi, and I'm not attracted to men. And that was the other thing. They would talk about like guys, and I'd be like, oh God, I can't relate to that kind of thing. But I thought I was bi for many years because I was like, what do you mean I'm not attracted to guys? But that kind of came later. But it was just, it's a very isolating experience for a lot of people because there's no go-to like guide, right, for like how to deal with these things. I mean, online social media, that's where I reached out. That's why I had these senses of community, because that's where you got advice, that kind of thing. But it can be quite scary for a lot of people. And I would say it was quite scary as well, because you don't know how people are going to react.
I think from what I've seen and heard, obviously I don't speak from experience, is the fear of losing people that you think love you and care about you. And then they find out that then you're not who they think you are.
Yeah.
Like I mean, obviously, like I said, I don't know myself.
That's very much a thing, yeah.
Like I'd assume losing friends as well, because they associate you as being someone straight and someone that's like, not attracted to them. If that makes sense.
No, I think that was very much the case. It's that how the people are going to treat me differently. People are going to see me differently, but when I'm the same person that I was before I came out. And I think there were a couple of people at school when you're younger that didn't understand it, but these people would understand it now. Like, it's just because, again, this is something that we don't particularly do well as a country, is talk about this kind of thing in schools and give people that information to have these conversations. But I would say it's the fear of people not understanding and then not being willing to understand, or not giving you the time of day to think about it or talk about it. That was the biggest thing. I mean, when I was younger, that was the biggest concern. I didn't really think about coming out to family, because when you're like 13 years old, like, that's so far away from what you're going to do. That kind of thing for a lot of people comes later on. But at the time, it's like, what are my friends going to think? My biggest thing was that in my head, it was always like, I'm not normal. Why am I not normal? Which is nuts, right? Because there's no such thing as normal in these kind of senses. But in your mind, you're like, I wish I was normal. I wish I was straight. I wish I could like guys the way that my friends like guys. And that was always the one thing in my head that I was like, God, life would be so much better. I was like, life would be so much easier. And yeah, probably might be easier in some ways. But I was like, I would be happier, or life would be easier, and I would be a better person or whatever. But that's not the case. But then there's no one telling you that, right, at the time. They're going to be like, no, it is fine. And that's the biggest problem, I think, the lack of role models within schools in a lot of ways. But even online, that was what helped. But not everyone has that ability to go online and find that sense of community.
It sounds to me you were very self-critical.
Yeah.
When did you sort of come out of that phase? Was it when you actually came out? Or was do you always carry that sort of sense of self-criticalness?
I would say it lasted a little bit longer. So I first realised I wasn't straight at about 12. I first realised that I probably didn't like boys as well at around 14. I was out. Coming out was like an ongoing process, and you never just do it once, and you're always doing it, and you have to repeat it sometimes. So I was out really from about 13 onwards in various ways. But I would say like it stopped more when I was getting to the tail end of like teenage years type thing. Like when it came to sixth form maybe, or going to university, really, that's when it like got a lot, like that's when you meet other people, right? Especially at university, that's when I met other people who were more like me. For example, like the Freshers Week. She's still my housemate now, actually, is when I met my housemate. And we both came to the realisation, we were like, you're the first other lesbian person I've ever met. And we're both like 18 at the time because we'd never met another lesbian.
Wow,
I mean,
shit.
who was out, right? Like, we might have met a lesbian who wasn't, I had never said that to us, but we were both 18 and we were like, we've never met someone else who was like us. So like that kind of bond and friendship has been quite strong, I would say, because we both had that like, oh wow, there are other people like us out there.
I heard the dating scene for gay people was harder. I mean, understandably,
it's limited.
very limited. I mean, my joke is if you're bi, you're sort of cheating, aren't you? Really? Cause
and bi, you've got everything, and you have like double the chances. But no, a lot of my friends who are bi are like, well, just because I can date, multiple genders doesn't mean multiple genders want to date me. And I was like, fair enough. But I think it depends on the place, right? Like Exeter is quite small, very small. So there's a limited number of queer people. And then, like, you have to, like, caveat things in terms of, like, if you have a type or, like, I'm a third year, I don't want to date a first year, that feels weird. So you have all of these, like, little caveats and stuff. So you're constantly narrowing the pool. And then everyone knows everyone is the problem. Like, I've had the worst, some of these terrible experiences where I've been, like, I've gone on a date with someone and I realised that I also went on a date with their ex or something like that.
Oh,
and
my God.
I've had that multiple times I've had that. Oh yeah, I've had.
Did
that
you go like
times.
bright red when you realised?
Yeah, one of them was
just
quite
check
bad.
the time as well because I didn't actually set a timer.
We've just been talking.
Yeah, well, that's about it. There's no intro to this sort of thing. It's just go on. How long is it? 5 o'clock, isn't it? We said.
I'm good to go to whenever. To be fair.
I'll put it there.
But yeah, so I was on a date with someone I'd matched with on Tinder, and I have this ongoing joke that all the gay women in Exeter. There's this one couple that we all know. You know one of them. So I know them through Swiftsock, but also like mutual friends. And I was like, I said to the girl I was on a date with, and I was like, do you know these two names? And she's like, well, I don't know them personally, but I think my ex-girlfriend knew one of them. And I was like, oh, like how? And the girl I was on a date with was like, oh, on the same course. And I was like, who is your ex out of interest? And she said the name, and I said, oh, is that first name, last name? And then she was like, yeah, do you know her? I was like, unfortunately for everyone involved, I do know her because we used to be together, that kind of thing. And then she was like, right. And a date that had been going very well up until that point was then over because that was understandably like a deal breaker for her. Funnily enough, they're now back together.
Right, okay.
This broken up couple are now back up together, which is hilarious. Oh, that was so funny. But yeah, so that's happened a couple of times. There's been like people in common and everyone knows everyone. And like you go on these dating apps and you look at who I've matched with versus who like my housemates have matched with, and it's just the same people.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's I'm going to miss Exeter in so many ways. I'm not going to miss the Exeter dating scene at all.
I'm sure the dating scene when you go and do your masters will be like,
It'll be a little bit bigger. It'll be bigger.
I'd be very
nice.
surprised if you date the same person that's an ex of how small world it is over here. So,
and then I'll be going back to a new place. Although that being said, right, so I had to do like quite a big interview process for my masters. Like it was a whole day thing. I went and they brought a couple of us in for the interview process. And I'm speaking to another girl who was interviewing. And you do the classic thing of where you're from. And I was like, I'm from Essex, but the near London part. And then she was like, I'm from London, but the near Essex part. I was like, oh, like where are you from? And she's like, oh, I'm from, I think she said Leytonstone, which is from down the road from me. And I was like, no way. I was like, I'm from Loughton. That's like very much both on the central line, really close to one another. Yeah, she said she's from Wanstead. And I was like, oh my God, what? And then I was like, wait, where did you go to school? And she said that she went to a school that I applied to for sixth form and nearly went to. And I was like, no way. Like, I nearly went there. I went to this school. And I was like, do you know these people? And she's like, yeah, I know these people. And like, we were talking. And this is bearing in mind, she goes to Birmingham, so we have no connection in that sense. And then I was like, oh, do you know this person? Like, I dated her when I was in secondary school. And she was like, I also dated her when I was in secondary school. And then I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm at my master's interview, like...
And you can't escape it.
I can't even escape it. That was wild. But we both got in and we both got along. So, she'll be one of my friends going into my master's next year. But it was just so funny. I was like, God, of course. Of course, I bump into someone who's from like the same place as me back home who also knows this girl that I dated in secondary school. Hilarious.
That's a good story to tell people, that how you became friends with someone, isn't it?
Yeah,
Really?
it's a good way. I mean, there was a lot of another funny one was because she was like, "Oh, I did A-level politics," and I knew a guy that did A-level politics at her school who I went to primary school with. I was like, "What do you think about him?" And she was like, "He's so weird. Like, apparently during like online school, he like went to the toilet and he sent a picture of his shit in the toilet to the politics like class group chat." And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds like him." So we were just having this whole conversation about this random man, and then everyone else was like, "What are you two talking about?" And I was like, "We're having a bonding session about being from the same place." But that was kind of rogue, like at my master's interview, like, you know, a very stressful day. It's quite a competitive course, people from applying all around the country, and of course it's someone who I like have mutual friends with, which is hilarious.
What did your interview actually like entail?
Oh my
For
God.
masters, that's quite
It was
different.
so long. So I had to do like an online application and like write some stuff, and then they invited me for an interview. So then I went on, I think it's like a Wednesday or something, and I got the train. I'm going to Cardiff. Got the train to Cardiff, and I got there. So they met us there. I think there were like 5 or 6 of us, 7 max, who were interviewing that day. So we got in there. They first of all gave us a tour of the facilities, like the various TV, radio studios and stuff we had to have access to. And then the first thing we did was some group work. So they gave us a list of like 10 fake news stories. And they're like, right, can you put these in the order of a TV news show? So we had to like decide what the running order would be. What's the most important stories? What ones can we cut? What ones can we get rid of? So you had to like work together to agree, because not everyone agreed on what the top stories were going to be. So you had to kind of be diplomatic and get your voice heard, but not like shut everyone down. So we did that. And then they asked us some questions about like what guests we'd get on, who we'd speak to about these kind of topics and stuff. So I remember the top one was like a fake story, obviously, that David Cameron had died in a skiing accident. So they'd be like, well, who would you be interviewing? And then they'd be like, well, we'd interview maybe like George Osborne, we'd interview Rishi Sunak, we'd talk to that kind of like someone of the Conservative Party. And I was like, maybe you could go and interview his old constituents, that kind of thing. So we had to talk about that. And then from there, we had to do a voice test. So they gave us like a bulletin script, and we went up to the radio studio and we just had to read the bulletin script, which I was fine with because I do that on a regular basis for Expression anyway. So I just read the bulletin. And then we had to do 3 tests. So we had a SPAG test, spelling, punctuation, grammar. Then they gave us a news quiz of news stories of the week. So then one of them was like a picture of Alexei Navalny. And they're like, who is this man? I was like, Alexei Navalny. And then it was like, who got kicked out of like or who lost the Six Nations rugby over the weekend, and I was like Scotland news quiz. And then they gave us a press release that we had to shorten down to like 3 sentences, so something that you'd be able to read quite quick. And then from there, we then had to do individual interviews. So you went in with the course conveners, the 2 course, like 2 people in charge of the course, and had like a 15-minute interview. So they were like, what kind of news do you engage with? So I was like, a lot of podcasts, because I listen to a lot of news podcasts pretty much constantly. And but also like if I'm watching the news, I'd watch Channel 4 news. So they were like, what makes Channel 4 news different from other news sources? I mean, I'd spent a lot of time preparing for my interview, like a lot, because I had friends who have done similar courses, and they were like, best thing you can do is just watch the news and read the news and listen to it. So I'd been doing a lot of that. And they asked me various questions about journalists that I admire, and I guess maybe the use of social media. And then they were like, what lessons have you learned from your like current journalism experience? So I talked about obviously being head of news at Expression, but I also talked about, I did some local news reading for an outlet back home. And I was like, well, it's really important to have this kind of local journalism. So then interview over, we all had to wait, and then we all went in one by one. And then they told us on the day if we had a place or not, which was quite nerve-wracking because you had to like go in there and be like told you have a place or you don't. I mean,
They literally just told you in person.
Yeah, on the day. So I'd like done my interview and I went in and I was so scared. And I sat down and they were like, congratulations, we'd love to offer you a place. I was like, oh my God, thank you. And then they were like, have you applied anywhere else? We didn't ask. And I was like, nope, I literally just applied to this one place. And if you guys didn't give me an offer, I would have just taken a gap year. But it was really intense. And I guess, I mean, it's a very competitive course to do broadcast journalism at Cardiff because it's an accredited course. They can only have like 22 people on it, or like around that kind of number. So it's a very small cohort. So they have to be kind of picky who they're choosing. And you have to like show that you care about journalism and that kind of thing. Oh. And you've got skills that could be used.
So this is a September start?
Yep, September. Come September, moving to Cardiff, studying journalism, exciting stuff. I'm very much looking forward to it. But like it's known, there are a couple of good courses across the UK to do a master's in broadcast journalism. Cardiff's one of the big ones. So City, University of London, those are the two main ones. But there have been quite a few people from Exeter that have gone and studied journalism at Cardiff. Megan Ballantyne.
No.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Former editor of Expose.
Yeah,
She's currently doing news journalism.
Oh,
So is Ellen Johnston.
I thought she was really up far north. Oh, and then
Ellen, yeah, they're both doing not my course, so they're doing news journalism, like newspaper
But they're
journalism.
in Cardiff.
But they're at Cardiff.
That's brilliant.
Well, it was so funny because when I went to my interview, I was just like, they had like us sat outside, and Ellen walked past, and she was like, "You're here," and I was like, "Hi, yeah, I'm applying here." So like, I know Exeter, we send people over, but I think it's just me from Exeter doing broadcast, but I think there might be someone from Expose going to do news, but I'm not sure.
That's still really cool though.
Yeah, it's quite a cool course, and it's known as being good. And like you obviously have like amazing, talented people like Megan. When she was here, she was an amazing editor of Expose.
She won SO.
They literally won an SBA. I think
SBA,
what was
that's it.
it was like Publication of the Year or whatever. So like they had a fantastic paper. So she's gone on to do that, and then probably going on to do great things from that as well.
We got Josh that's working for the Telegraph as well.
Yeah,
you know.
I mean it's interesting to see where people are going in a lot of ways because I think. And you'll get this because the ex-media world, quite a few of us want to actually go into the media, and it's interesting to see like how different people are finding their roots in and stuff. Because you've got, I mean, I'm going to go do a master's. I don't really know what a lot of the Expose people are doing. I mean, I know what Harry's doing. But I'd be interested to know how they're getting into journalism because it is a very hard way in.
Yeah, Annabelle, I think she's got a internship.
Yeah.
For the next couple of months. With a journal, I forgot what publication it was.
But it's interesting to see how they get in because print and broadcast are really different. Like the ways in are quite, broadcast you need a lot of quite specific skills you need to train in. Like I need to be able to do, I can audio edit a bit now, but I need to be able to do audio editing. I need to be able to use a camera and edit and that kind of thing. I need to be able to like do reporting and that kind of...
Be in front of the camera sort of thing.
Yeah, those kind of actual skills that print doesn't have in the same way. There are a lot of those like technical skills to learn as well as like the more general journalism skills of like how to be unbiased, how to find a story. You also have to like how to specifically use this video editing software and that kind of thing. So I'm looking forward to learning those things.
Yeah, I think you'll do very well.
Thank you. I'm very excited, and I think, I mean, I've loved doing student media, but this is the next step up for me.
This is a step up. That's brilliant.
This is a step up. So, but it goes to show that student media and journalism, like student journalism, can be such a good training ground.
Yeah, I think people really overlook it, don't they? And they underestimate it, like how much student media can do for you.
Yeah.
And I was saying this in Tom's episode as well, and most of the episodes I've done on the podcast is that committee roles at university are so much more worthwhile sometimes than your actual degree.
Yeah.
For me, I found myself enjoying XTV for the past 2 years more than I've ever enjoyed my degree.
Oh yeah, I mean you are XTV. Tom Swanser is this man is XTV,
well,
but because you not prioritise it over your degree, but you give it. Yeah.
Let's not lie.
Let's not lie, but because you give it that importance, you spent that time like building it up and working on it. I mean, we have a joke in student radio that you come out of this university not with a degree in politics or English, you come out with a degree in radio because you've just spent your entire life in the studio working on various things. And that's the same thing literally across the country. When we're at conference, we're speaking to people who are the exact same. And for a lot of people, like, so for example, I came to uni, I didn't know I wanted to be a journalist. That is something that I got from Expression. Like, I can't thank Expression enough for literally giving me like a purpose and a direction in life.
It's giving me a bit of goosebumps, here.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Like, it's literally, I wouldn't have known that this was something I was interested in because although I wrote a bit and I like writing, I wouldn't have known otherwise that radio and TV and this kind of thing would be what I was interested in and what was suited for me. And the fact that you have that like playing ground or that training ground of student media, I think is so valuable. The fact that you can just like mess around, like never again in my life will I have a whole radio station that I can do whatever I want with. And that's what I'm going to miss as well. But it's just such a good place to practice your skills and try new things out. Like when we interviewed MP Ben Bradshaw this year, earlier in October, that was a great experience for Tom and I to practice booking a guest, preparing interview questions, having an online interview, editing, picking out the questions, doing research. Speaking with an MP. So that kind of thing. I mean, Ben Bradshaw has been very willing to be interviewed lots of the time. Like, not everyone is as willing. I mean, at one point, Tom and I tried to get an interview with Liz Truss, but she said no.
Wait, she actually got back to you?
Yeah, she actually replied and was like, no, sorry, I don't have time. Well, her office replied. But I was like, well, you still replied. And
That's
I was
really good. That's insane.
But that is really good practice. And because I've done that now, like the next time I go to interview quite a big figure, well, I'm going to be a little bit more confident because I've done it once and it went quite well. And that's the benefit that you can get from student media, and the fact that you have like a name behind you. So we have Expression, although, we're not the biggest student radio station. We're still, an award-winning student radio station, and people will listen when we say, can we please speak to you, that kind of thing. And the same goes for Expose. Like I know Jamie from Expose Online did an interview with like the Guild CEO. What a great experience to be, interviewing someone who's very high up, who's very important and very influential. That kind of thing is very important. And as a trainee journalist, to build up those skills is vital.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. I think for me, you mentioned about the creative thing, is just creating something.
Yeah.
And then seeing it actually sort of work out.
Like having a thing is
I think
nuts.
my favourite thing with XTV was with Mateus when we created X Vision last year.
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved that. No, this idea of him just coming to me thinking, what do you think the idea of live streaming and creating our own singing, basically our version of Eurovision? I was like,
wow,
holy shit.
And then you're just so proud of it at the end of it. Like I remember after coming out of Guild election week, right, Tom and I were like, look at everything we've done. I was like completely off our own backs, not much help from other bodies, that we, and alongside XTV and stuff, we just did these things.
Well, yeah, it's you guys that did the,
we did the round
you created the
tables.
show.
Yeah, we did the interviews, we did the OB, we just did stuff. And like no one told us to do that, right? No one was like, you have to do X, Y, Z. We did it off our own back. And then out of the end of it, we had this stuff that we'd done. And yeah, okay, I wish turnout was a little bit higher in the Guild elections, but look, you win some, you lose some. But I was like, we've had an impact on the election, and I would say in a positive way, by giving candidates the chance to talk, and that was very valuable.
Yeah, it was quite fun watching it, actually, to be honest with you.
I really enjoyed doing it as well. I mean, I was very glad that I got to host the presidential debate, because that's obviously quite a high-stakes one. Unfortunately, it's because Tom couldn't, because he was fairly close to one of the candidates. Also, which was a problem for Tom and I, because we knew quite a lot of the people running for the various roles. So we had to be like, okay, like my housemate was running for one of them, and I was like, right.
But she got it, didn't she?
She did win. But I was like, I can't go anywhere near this one, because like I can't have any accusations of like being biased or pushing or whatever. So that was tricky, because this is just generally for the Guild, whatever. The people that run for the Guild are people who are usually engaged in societies, often maybe not directly involved in the ex-media world, but on the fringes. They're people we know. And it's a certain type of person, right, that runs to be a student union sabbatical officer. And therefore, they're the kind of people that we're going to tend to know in the student media world, which proved to be the case this year, but also last year. So that made it a little, not hard. I mean, Vicky and James, last year's heads of news, obviously had it quite difficult to interview Reece Wallace, their station manager and best friend, who was running for Society's employability. But they managed to do it well. But that was a funny time.
Yeah. Are you going to go to the soiree?
No, I'm not coming.
I'm
on holiday.
When do you leave?
Next week, Friday the 31st.
Oh, so yeah,
in the morning.
You did the show in the evening or afternoon, and then that's it.
Yeah, we're moving News Hour to the Thursday. In fact, I'm actually hosting the next 3 shows. So News Hour tomorrow, X Focus, and then another News Hour, because Tom's let me do it because it's my last ones. So that'll be my last radio show, and then go out for dinner with some friends in the evening. And then the next morning, I'm off back home. I mean, I'm back in July, obviously for graduation. But I'm back a little bit before, actually, because I'm working for a week doing a residential through the Student Ambassador Scheme. Nice. So it's Year 12 students from, I think, all across the country, state school kids, who are coming to Exeter for a week to, like, do fake lectures, do activities. We take them to the beach, bowling, stuff like that. So that's the week before graduation for me, which I'm very much looking forward to, because A, great money, B, I enjoy it. And then I'm also back in August briefly, because it's another ambassador job. On A-level results day, we are on the phones for confirmation and clearing, so people who might have missed their places or are adjusting upwards and finding new places, we're on the helplines then. So although I'm leaving, I will be back twice before I actually technically leave this place for good. So
what do you mean by the confirmation clearing? Do you tell people they've got a place or not? Or?
So people will find out if they got into uni or whatever through UCAS. Like, it will say you've been successful, you've been unsuccessful, whatever. But there are some times when UCAS might mess up, or it might not show all the information correctly. So one example of this is when students might have missing results. Results can go missing for a number of reasons, right? Like a misplaced exam paper, or someone's inputted something wrong, like just clerical errors that happen. So someone might phone up and be like, it doesn't say if I've got in or not, because it's saying like there's a missing, result. And then you could be like, get on the phone to them and talk to them about that. some of the conversations are easier like that. Some of them are very tricky conversations. So I had one last year. It wasn't the student herself. I think it was a teacher. And he was like advocating on her behalf. She'd missed her offer by quite a few grades. But he was like, look, she has all these what we call extenuating circumstances. So like stuff has gone wrong out of your control that has like impacted your ability to get the grades you should have otherwise got if you didn't have these circumstances. So it was talking, I think maybe like she'd had her grandmother looked after her. Grandmother had been unwell. They lived in a very like one bed flat or something like that. And the teacher was giving me all this really hard like information. And I felt so bad for the student. But at the end of the day, I can let her in. I'm not admissions. I didn't have the power to do that. So I obviously passed it up to a supervisor type thing. So you have like the easier and happier conversations be like, oh, no, you did get in. Or like we're giving you a different offer and people are happy. But you also then have the really hard conversations of you've missed your offer and you're not getting in. And that can be really tricky. But people will like beg you to let them in, like beg you on the phone. And I'm just going, look, I don't have the authority like at all. I'm just a student here myself. I'm just on the phone line to help. But people don't know that, and they're willing to fight a lot, and as they should be, willing to fight for their kids to get into places.
Must be quite hard though.
It was hard. I mean, I've done it twice now, so this has been my third time doing it. So I think the fact that I've done it a couple of times means I know what it's going to be like, and I've had the experience of it. But luckily, like the admissions team and stuff that are around, so great. They know what they're doing. You just pass off to them, and they do that kind of thing. But they're also that's on the phones. But you also have like the online chat where people will be like, you help people apply for clearing, but they have to just go through this website. But you point out the website and answer those kind of questions. So it's it's pretty good money, and it can be depends on what you're doing. It can be quite tough or it be quite easy.
It's interesting you mentioned about the UCAS system. I remember using it when I was applying for uni. Did you use it for your Did you use it for your masters?
No, masters direct straight through the institutions.
Oh right. What other universities did you apply for?
Well, I applied to Cambridge. Classic Exeter. I'm a Cambridge reject. I actually got rejected by more universities than I got into. So I was also rejected by LSE and Durham. So I only got into Exeter and York, which is nuts when you think about it, because I actually got 4 A stars in my A-levels.
Oh, shit.
And I still didn't get into 3 universities. So who knows what they're looking for.
I mean, in a way, it's a blessing in disguise, though, isn't it? Because you never would have had that expression. Because I'm pretty sure from what I've seen on Cambridge's list of societies, they haven't got that much.
They have CAM-FM, but I don't know, it's not as big of a thing, right? Because Cambridge is so intense and busy. And I wouldn't change anything now. Like, I wouldn't change going to Exeter. And I think because I was at Exeter, I had the chance to be more involved in societies and things like that. And that's been a great part of my student experience. I don't think maybe Cambridge would be too high pressure. Also, the course wasn't necessarily what I was interested in. It was human, social and political sciences, but I'm only really interested in the political sciences part. But I applied. There were 4 of us applying to Cambridge from my year at school. My school wasn't particularly good, so not many people really got into Cambridge. They've had like 3 people in the history of my sixth form. The sixth form was not very old, but they've had like 3 people. So, I mean, it was quite stressful at school because I didn't really have much support with it. Like a lot of private schools you have all these mock interviews and they help you apply and stuff. I had none of that. I had one mock interview that I had to ask a teacher for. No one was like, oh, let me help you with that, which is nuts. I think I should be given more support, but it was also online interviews because it was COVID stuff, so that wasn't fun either. But I don't regret applying to Cambridge, but I'm glad that I didn't get in. LSE is a very selective university anyway.
Is that London?
London School of Economics and Political Sciences. It's a very small university, and they have a very high percentage of international students. So that was tough. I also would have lived at home if I studied at LSE, and I didn't really want to live at home, so that I wasn't that keen on going to LSE anyway. And then Durham, did quite like Durham, but I preferred the course here at Exeter, I think. And I think like the life I've had at Exeter in terms of like Exeter as a place, right? Like near the beach, near the countryside, I would have had that if I was at Durham. And it is a little bit closer to like home and stuff. So I have been able to pop back home if I've needed to. So I think it's worked out for the best. But I was never going to go to York because 3 of my best friends from school go to York. And I think 4 of us going might have been too much.
Yeah, I feel like you'd need that time apart, wouldn't you?
Yeah, so. And I think because most of my home friends, they all go to uni quite close together. And it's just me down here in Exeter. So they've been able to like hang out and see each other a little bit more, which, sometimes you do get FOMO. But it means I've like had a sense of independence from them, which I think has been useful.
And it's also giving you the chance to go and make some new friends.
Exactly. I mean, there are some people like, I know I have friends at Exeter who know loads of people that also go to Exeter, like multiple people from their sixth form or their school or their college have ended up here. it's just me. There's one girl in the year below that went to my sixth form. Actually, she didn't go to my sixth form. She went to my secondary school. That's it. So like for me, I've been able to not reinvent myself, but have a certain amount of like,
I think
okay,
it is.
I don't know people here. I could do what I want.
Yeah, I don't know if it's reinventing yourself or more just starting a new chapter in your life. Sort of
exactly. I was able to do that a little bit more, but that's not necessarily the case for everyone.
No, it's not. It really isn't. I think, do you know what? Going to university has been a fantastic experience for me. I remember we were talking about the society things. That was actually one of the reasons why I came to uni here, because I actually visited a friend who studied here and graduated a couple of years ago. And I remember going around on their freshers fair, having no intention at all going to uni. And I was like, holy shit, this is amazing.
This looks so fun. Like,
There's
what do
so
you mean
much
you get to
going
do
on.
all these things?
And then I was like, when I came home the day after, I was thinking, do you know what? I need to go here.
Yeah.
I need to apply here. And, I remember applying for it. I initially applied to go do sociology, funny enough. But that's because my friend did it and I had no interest in doing it. And then I met someone in my year out, who had actually graduated from doing film and TV. And I was like, do you know what? Let's see if they do that as a course. So I applied for it. They said, yeah, you can come along. Took my year out, saved up and stuff. And I turned up and I was like, this is sick. And even then, funny enough, it was December 2020. And I was looking at the society list that you have on the Guild page and stuff. I was like, XTV, I want to run that one day.
I want to do that one. Yeah.
So
I stumbled across Expression because I didn't do it in my first year. I only started Expression in my second year. And I don't even know why I started it. Like, my dad asked me this the other day. He was like, why did you start doing student radio? And I was like, I don't actually know. Like, I can't think of a reason why. Like, I knew we had a campus radio station, but I'd never engaged with it in my first year. And then I went along to like a taster session in Freshers Week and I was like, yeah, okay, right, I'll try it out. And then you get sucked in. I remember Reese Wallace said to me, he was like, there's a student radio bug and some people catch it and some people don't. And he was like, you have caught the student radio bug. And I was like, correct. You're so correct. And I just sort of stumbled into this one. And I sort of stumbled into Exeter as university also. Like, it was quite highly ranked for politics. I was lucky enough to come visit, not on an open day because they weren't running when I was applying because it was COVID. But I went on a family holiday like to Devon and we were like, right, we'll go see Exeter as we're nearby. And I was like, oh, this campus is quite nice and this course seems pretty good. Yeah, sure, I'll apply there. And then when they gave me the offer and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go study here. So I just sort of ended up in this place, which I'm very glad about. But it's not, things happen for a reason, that kind of thing, that you just sort of end up somewhere.
Yeah, do you believe in like a higher power or fate or?
Not really,
you know what I mean?
I wouldn't say. I mean, I'm not particularly like spiritual in a lot of ways, but I think things work out and people make them work. Like, when I say everything happens for a reason, I think it's all about the person's response to that. Like, I don't believe that there is some kind of higher power directing us to the place where we're supposed to be. I believe that we find where we're supposed to be, but that's like a conscious act of we do it. And it might not be as we intended, it might not be the original plan, but we end up somewhere. And because we have ended up there, that's what's right. Because you can't go back and think, oh God, what if I'd have gone into Cambridge? Like, I haven't in years, not since like year 13 have I thought, God, I wish I was at Cambridge. As soon as I came here, not a single time have I thought that. And that's not because of, everything happens for a reason. It's because, well, I've ended up here and here's been pretty good. And I don't know what there would have been like. And therefore you just have to carry on.
Oh, you make the most of it, don't you? Really?
Yeah.
It's the thing is, if you go all in and do as much as you can and you don't have any regrets. But I think there's people out there that just don't do anything at all.
Yeah.
And they sort of come to the end of their degree thinking, man, what if I did this? Or, what if I did that?
I think I know quite a few people like that who lack direction when it comes to graduation. I think as final years, this is a conversation we've probably had with lots of different people. And I'm very lucky that this past year I've had direction, right? I might not have necessarily known how I was going into journalism, but I was pretty damn certain that was where I was wanting to end up. Whereas I've had friends who don't know what they want to do and they don't have that direction and they don't have that sense of purpose. And I'm not saying that everyone has to know exactly what they want to do forever and make that next step. I'm definitely not saying that. But having that like, oh, sure, this kind of work, this kind of industry, this kind of place, this kind of job, that has been so valuable just like mentally to have that to keep you going through like the difficulties of final year.
Yeah. Did you have like a particular sector or field that you wanted to go into before journalism, or was it?
No, I knew I wanted to study politics. I nearly did English, very nearly did English. Loved English my whole secondary school career. I was the English teacher's pet. Helped them run the creative writing club and did all their extracurriculars. I loved, and I still love reading. But I just realised that I loved politics more than I loved English as a subject, and I was lucky that I had amazing A-level politics teachers who were supportive and really engaged, and I was like, I want to study politics, and they're like, absolutely you should. And actually, I think half of my A-level politics class ended up going to study politics at university, which is not a stat you can say for many subjects. Like 50, I mean, it was a class of 10, so 5 of us went on, but that's still pretty good going. That it goes to show that you've got a good teacher, right, if the kids want to carry that on.
Oh, yeah.
So I was just like, I love politics. I'm going to study politics. And then I was like, well, I don't have to think about these kind of things until after uni. I mean, like in first year, I was sort of toying with like, maybe I want to go work in policy. That's a big thing for a lot of us politics students, going working in the civil service or think tanks, developing policy. And I thought about that, and I've studied a lot of policy related modules, and I've loved them. But I just was like, I don't think that's particularly for me, as interesting as it has been. And then I started doing student media, and then I was like, God, I love this. And I was like, well, I could make a career out of this. I could make a career out of talking about politics, which is what I do for fun. Imagine if I could get paid for doing that. So
Ooh, yeah,
I was like,
that'd be
damn,
good, wouldn't it?
that
That
sounds
would
pretty
be
good.
pretty cool.
And I was very lucky that as soon as I was like to my parents, I think I might want to do journalism. They were like, yeah, sounds great. You should do that. And they've been very supportive of the whole thing.
That's brilliant. Oh my God, that is amazing.
Yeah, I was like, I want to do that. I think it suits my skill set. I think it suits my interests. And then I was like, I think I'm going to go do a master's. And they were like, sure, Cardiff, that sounds great. We're happy, for you to go to Cardiff and do all these things. They were never like, should you do something else?
Do you know what? I think we need more parents out there like that.
Yeah.
That are very supportive. Because I think, I think a lot of people are sort of just pushed into any subject they want to do at uni.
Yeah.
And that sort of that can be just your parents sort of saying, get a degree and get a job after sort of thing.
Well, I'm very lucky. Neither of my parents made me study like any STEM subjects. That's a classic thing you hear. Like STEM subjects are more employable. So like there are people in my school, their parents had told them to like do maths A level or like a science A level. My parents had never once been like, you should do one of these. I was always just like, I really like writing and I don't like numbers and I'd love to carry on writing. And my parents were like, no, do that. And this is where like family history comes into it. Like, so my parents are both from Birmingham, surrounding areas. And my mum more so than my dad, but they both come from quite working class backgrounds. So they didn't have the kind of choices that I've been able to have. So my mum went to dental school in Birmingham, and she's been an NHS dentist. She's now, in her 60s? So she's been an NHS dentist for over 40 years. And she didn't have that choice to study what she loved. What she loved is English. But she needed to get a job. She needed to be employed. She needed to support herself as a woman, work in the working world. So she went to dental school. I mean, she's a phenomenal dentist. She works with special care dentistry, so that's people with learning difficulties, older people, home visits. So she has a very tough job, and she's suited to that. But it wasn't necessarily what she always wanted to do. So she had to make that decision. My dad was like the only person, one of 2 people in his secondary school to go to university, because that just didn't happen. And he went to university, and he ended up. He does a lot of sort of project management, that kind of stuff now. But he ended up going to university, doing a master's, getting a job in London. And they both got away from Birmingham and from places where they couldn't have that kind of choice in life. And they both moved down south, down to London. And then when they had kids, they've always been very supportive of what me and my brother wanted to do, because they didn't have that choice. And they've always wanted to give us, those experiences.
That's beautiful.
I mean,
really
it's amazing.
Beautiful. I bet they can't wait to see you graduate.
Yeah, I think so. My brother is quite interesting, actually. So in their support, my brother didn't go to university. My brother is 33 now. He didn't go to university. That wasn't for him. He didn't even finish his A levels because they weren't for him. And although my parents weren't the happiest with it at the time, they were like, "Well, we're not going to force you to do anything you don't want to do." And my brother is working in an industry now that he's incredibly successful in. He has a great job. He is getting married this year. He has a dog.
Ooh.
He's bought a house. Like, he's doing, he's happy. He's in a good place. And he didn't need university for that. And my parents now look back on that and they think that was the best thing for your brother. University wouldn't have made him happy. And although it might have been a little bit harder for them to swallow at the time, now it's worked out for the best for him. And that's what important, right? Like, what is the best for you?
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It really is beautiful.
No, and they've been very supportive through everything. And I think I don't know necessarily why I love politics. I can't trace it to one thing, but my parents have always been very willing to talk about politics around me. Like, I remember being younger and my dad would take me to the polling station on voting day with him and that kind of thing. And that openness to political conversations has definitely influenced me in terms of my interest and being able to talk about what I care about at home. And they've always been, so like when I was younger, we always used to go to museums and stuff, because I'm from quite near London. So we'd go into the Science Museum and do those kind of things. My parents would do days out. They'd buy lots of these academic, like books and stuff and support like my interests in terms of being, academic or whatever. And that always helped and sort of gave me like the confidence I have now is from that kind of parental support.
I remember you, was it last term or was it Easter? You took your parents around the Expression Stadium.
Yeah,
Studio even.
that was last term. They loved it. My dad, bless him, listens to every show I do, and he'll always text me after, being like, "Great show, love what you had to say, really entertaining show," that kind of thing. And he listens to everything, which that level of support like is amazing. And they know how much student radio means to me, and they loved seeing the studio. I mean, my dad loved going to the Ram quite a lot because my dad actually went to Cardiff. He did his undergrad there. And like he misses his student days. I mean, who doesn't miss their student days, right? In a lot of ways. But he was like, "Oh my God, this is just like when I was a student going to the student bar." And I think it's really nice to show your parents something, or the people that are close to you, something that means a lot to you. Like being able to show my parents, who I'm very close to, something that's been such a big part of my life, student radio, and be like, "Look, this is what I'm proud of." And I was like, I'm proud of the studio. I'm proud of the space that we get to have and that we get to use. And I was like, look at all this stuff. And to share that sort of side of my passions and interests with them has always been nice. And they've always been very supportive in those kind of ways. I grew up doing a lot of theatre, classic theatre kid. And that was the same. I did a lot of pantomimes growing up. So Christmas would always be really stressful because you have to do Christmas. My parents would be ferrying me off to go do pantomimes in a local theatre. And although like they complained about it a little bit at the time, but they both say to me now, like, you've had those memories. It was you doing theatre that's given you the confidence to go do student radio to then find your passion in life. And it's all of these little things that like build you up and make you a person. And I think I have a lot to be thankful to them for. But that support in all areas of my life has been amazing. Yeah, nice and positive, isn't it?
It's very positive. And that's really good. Like, generally, it's so good to hear because we all need that support in life, don't we? Really, we need that. That leg up or that person to give us that extra bit of belief to help us keep going. You
always remember those people that support you. Like I distinctly remember the teachers at school, for example, that supported my interests. So I also did a lot of debating when I was at school, and I distinctly remember the teachers that ran the debate club and stuff when I was doing it, and the fact that they believed in me to choose me to do these competitions, and then that gave me that interest and that passion, and like I'm always thankful to those teachers because they believed in me to do that. And I remember, so I didn't do GCSE history, and then I did A-level history, which is a bit weird. You're not really supposed to do that. But I'd done GCSE geography and didn't really like it. And I was like, I want to do history. And I remember I wasn't supposed to do it. And I was stressed. And I was like, I felt like I was so behind. And I had one time when I went to one of my A-level history teachers and I was really sad. I was like, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I feel like I don't belong here because all these people know what you're talking about. And she was so reassuring. She was like, no, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. We believe in you. We let you into the course because we believe you're capable of these things. And she was just so reassuring. And at the end of it, I came out with an amazing grade in history, literally, like top of the class compared to the other people. But it's because the teachers had believed in me that I was capable to compete with other people and do that. And those little things that stick with you, right? And that carry on motivating you in the future.
Did you ever try contact them at all, saying thank you?
Actually, funny enough, I'm going back to my old school in July, so it's kind of rogue. So I'm a student ambassador, as I mentioned before, and when I was in my second year, March of my second year, I went to a job at a school really near where I'm from, and it was like for an information fair, so lots of different uni representatives go in southern unis. And I really wanted to go to this job because I knew for a fact that my old school attended this fair. The fair was at a private school, but they invited the local state schools in, and I knew my school would be there. So when I was there, I was talking. And then as one of the teachers, the sixth form, we called her the sixth form mum. I don't know really what she did. I think she was like the admin person, a sixth form administrator. She came around the corner and she saw me. And she's like, I thought I recognised that voice. And I was like, hi, Miss Selliers. And I was like, I haven't seen you in ages. And then my A-level politics teacher came around the corner. He was like, oh my God, Florence, it's been so long. And they recognised me because I was I was quite known in my sixth form. I was head girl and stuff like that. I was quite a bit public facing. And they remembered me, and then I got in contact with the careers teacher at my school, and she was like, do you mind coming in and giving a talk? So I went to give a talk last July, and I'm doing one again, just about university, what is university to year 10s, because they don't know what uni is in a lot of ways. And not, necessarily people from my school and stuff don't go to uni. It's not necessarily a big thing for them. So I want to be able to be like, look, this is what university is. This is what you could be doing. This is why it's so great and what it's given me. So I'm going back to give a talk. But it was quite funny when I went back last year. I was like in the hall, and it was like some teachers that you wouldn't think remembered you did. So like one of the English teachers I'd never even had, but who knew me, she was like, "Oh my God, you're here." And I was like, "Yeah." And they were also asking how uni was and how life was going, and I was like, "Damn." And it was so weird being back as well, being in the old school, because it's actually changed quite a bit since I've gone. Changed even more now, because they've lost a whole building now because of that whole concrete, the rack, aerated concrete stuff.
Yeah.
Really hit my school, so they've lost a whole building that's not been open the whole term. They've had to build temporary classrooms outside. It's terrible. But the whole place is completely different now. So I'll be going back in July again to give a talk about uni. But I mean, it's what I do for my job anyway, and I enjoy it. And I like being able to give back to my school because, yeah, okay, my school might not have been the best in a lot of ways, but it gave me a lot of things, and I want to be able to give back to that and then hopefully inspire other kids, because I remember when I was younger, kids in the older years who went to uni and stuff, and I was inspired by them. So I want to like carry that thing going on, the next generation type thing. So I have to prepare my speech for that soon, actually.
Well, I like the fact that you're not forgetting people that have helped you out. You know, for me, it'd be bringing a lot of people to graduation. I've got about 12 people coming for me.
Really? Wow.
Yeah,
God, you must have spent a lot of money on graduation tickets.
No. So obviously not all of them be able to sit in the great hall.
You can put them in the alumni auditorium.
Yeah, and they'll be watching it. So that's my grandparents who have supported me ever since I've been a little boy. My aunt who told me not to give up at college.
Yeah.
So I was at college. I didn't do well in GCSEs. I got pretty terrible grades, to be honest with you. So I worked through the level 3, level 4 and 5, but I wanted to quit at level 4.
Yeah.
And my aunt was like, keep going, don't give up on it. You know, you might regret it if you do. I came so close, and then her words sort of told me to keep going.
They did something.
They kept going. And that was, I would argue, is the reason I got into university. It's obviously my dad who drove me from Cambridge all the way down to Exeter, which is not an easy drive, to do in one day, but he did it, very, very proud of me. And it's, paying them back with appreciation and being able for them to come see me graduate is...
Yeah, be like, look, I'm here because of
this is what your help and your support is, is materialised over this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the youngest grandchild, so I'm the third one to go to uni on my dad's side. So there's a little, not less excitement, but it's like, right, number 3, let's get through graduation. But like my nan, in her house, she has this massive table of all of like the pictures of everyone, and everyone has their own picture, and mine's still like my secondary school picture. And because she's been waiting for ages, she was like, once you have that graduation picture, I'll be able to update it and put it as the graduation picture, because then I can be like my cousins and my dad and my aunt, who will have their like graduation pictures as the big one. So that would be nice to be added to the graduation chart. But I don't have, my family is like quite, so as I said before, my family's from the Midlands, but I live in Essex. So we don't have the most like together family. We'll see people for like Christmas and like maybe in the summer for Easter, but we don't tend to see each other a lot. Which is, like, it is what it is. Some people have really close relationships with their families. Where I'm from back home, a lot of people live there and stay there. So a lot of my friends who I went to primary or secondary school with had their entire families around them. Like they had their grandparents there. They used to see their grandparents all the time, whereas I'd see my grandparents a couple of times a year. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it's just a different experience. So for me, it's very much like my parents are the big ones. So they're coming to graduation. I guess I could see if my brother and his fiance want to come to just be here for the vibes, because they live in Bristol, so not far.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'd be like, do you guys want to come down for the day?
I thought they'd probably say yes to that.
I think they probably say
they
that.
Can.
Yeah. But that's who my supporting lot will be on graduation. But I'm very happy that I'm graduating with like quite a few of my friends who do politics. Like I'm going to be graduating with some of my closest friends, which will be nice.
Because you're the Tuesday 9 o'clock slot, right?
Yeah, we are the Tuesday 9 o'clock slot. Yeah, correct.
Because I am the 11:45 Tuesday slot. So
the one after.
Yeah.
Yeah, because politics is like such a big course. Politics means anyone who has politics as the first bit of their degree, which is a lot of people.
IR as well.
You have IR, you have politics, philosophy, you have PPE, you have politics and philosophy, you have politics and economics, you have politics and sociology, you have just politics, you have politics and languages. So there are a lot of people that do politics. So we have a whole graduation ceremony that's just politics, which means I'm graduating with a lot of my friends, which is going to be nice for the pictures when you're like all dressed up together.
Oh, yeah. Can't believe it, man. 3 years just like that.
It's gone by so fast. And everyone, I remember before I left uni, my mum was like, it will fly by. And I was like, yeah. And now I'm here. Like 3 years? It's been 3 years? It feels like It feels like it was yesterday that I first moved here, but it also feels like a lifetime ago. Like, I mean, it's so funny when I get my student ID out to show people if they're like, I'm trying to get a student discount. They're like, I don't believe that's you, because the picture of my student ID, I look nothing like. I had glasses on, I had long blonde hair, and it just was not at all how I look now. And that's like the visible change from like first year to third year me, but also like the personality and like what I've learned and the maturity that I've gained. So that's why it feels like a lifetime. But also like, so yesterday actually I was at K House watching Made in Dagenham, and I used to live in Dalryard in my first year. So as I was like going up there, I would like walked past my first year flat and I could see like my first year bedroom, and I was like, God, like it literally feels like yesterday that I was living there, but it was 3 years ago. And that's such a weird thing to have both of them in your head.
How was the Dagenham show? I'm watching it today.
Yeah, it was really good. I really enjoyed it. I'm a musical theatre kid, so I always love a bit of musical theatre, but it was really good. Shout out, obviously, to the tech team, because that's who we're there to support. Yeah, that's who we're there to support. So they did a fantastic job. And stage manager also, Kat, she was very good as well. Ben on the lights, Tom on the sound. Expression dominance, really.
It is very dominant, yeah.
But their sound desk. Oh, I was nerding out over it with Tom. The sound desk they have
is it bigger than
Monica?
So
big, like twice the size of Monica,
twice
maybe 3.
The size of
I mean, it's not portable at all. Like you can't move that. But it's impressive, and the fact that like Tom knows how to use it is also quite cool.
Damn, in K House, I'm trying to picture.
Yeah, they've because it's the X Tech one, so they've had to like buy it / borrow it / bring it in. But it's good. I loved having a look at it. Because I also had that stuff during Guild elections, like when it was the Guild election results. And I was stood and I was like, oh my God, look at that sound desk. In the way that like radio nerds will talk about sound desks.
Do you know how all the functions work on a sound desk? Or
Oh, very.
is it just a picture? Is it just the image of a sound desk that gets you nerding
the thing
out?
is, I know how Monica works, vaguely. Monica is the Expression FM sound desk that we've had for years, and I know how I can do most things on her, but I don't necessarily know how to do everything. I know how to do the useful things, right? But you pick up a lot of stuff over time. Mostly you'll go, oh, I didn't know we could do that, and Ali will go, yeah, this is how you do that, and you go, wow, I've learned something. So you're always learning with these kind of tech things. There's always a better way to be doing something, or a different way, or a way that's more suited to what you're doing right now. So I think that's what I like about the kind of tech stuff, is that it's an ongoing learning experience. You always have to be willing to
be
adapt.
open-minded. Yeah, especially when it looks daunting as well. And you go from holy shit, how do you turn this on then to holy shit, how do I stop recording sort of thing? You know, it's a lot of trial and error.
Oh yeah, and that again, it brings back to why student media is so valuable, because you have a safe space to do the trial and error. The stakes aren't very high, but you do have access to good equipment.
We need to plug student media as much as we can.
Exactly. I'm getting it in there. But that's why I like it so valuable, because I have Expression to play around with their tech and build up a portfolio, which I can then take on elsewhere. And I can say, look, I can edit, audio in Adobe Audition. And they go, wow, that's a skill that like professionals have. And it's that kind of ability, like, you have the same thing, right? You can video edit. That's an amazing skill to have to take to people that you don't necessarily have to learn from scratch when it comes to the adult world. You already know a bit how it works, which is very useful.
How much of Audition do you know how to use?
I would say I know a little bit. I've gotten better over time. I know the basic stuff because I first learned when I was editing bulletins. Editing bulletins isn't particularly hard. So I'm good. I can adjust the sound and stuff. I can cut bits out. I'm pretty decent at like mixing. If I have 2 different audio tracks, so like a backing track and the speech, I can mix them pretty decent. But there's a lot more to learn. Yeah, I would like to learn, because there are times you can like balance like the left and the right. I don't quite know how to do that, and I've had a couple of times when I've really needed to do that. So that's something I need to learn. And there's more that Audition can do, and I would like to know what more it can do. But that's why I'm quite looking forward to like over the summer when I have quite a bit of free time. I'm just going to experiment a bit. Like I'm just going to try some stuff, and it'll be quite fun to do that.
Because I was going to say, I really like your intro.
Thank you.
For your podcast.
Yeah, so it's based on the Americast intro, which is a podcast I absolutely love that the BBC does. So they have like various audio clips. So I got like a royalty-free backing track, and then I found some clips from various politicians and speeches that were quite a big thing.
You got Trump.
Yeah, there's Trump, you got AOC, you got Ron DeSantis, and I think there's a Biden one probably in there as well from when I made it. And it's various like clips from their speeches, like big sound bites. And then it goes like, this is Land of the Free, and that's a little bit that I recorded. And I'm quite happy with that, but that's kind of thing I've learned over time. Like, I've literally been recently working on a new like X-Focus trailer. There was just me and Tom talking, but I both put some backing on it and that kind of thing. So it's good, again, to try that kind of things and go out of your comfort zone, even just a little bit to stuff that you wouldn't normally do.
One thing that you do need to accept is the sound of your own voice.
Yeah.
I remember editing XTV stuff for the first time, looking
Yeah.
at myself on the camera. I was like, oh, it looks so bad. But you have to sort of overcome it and just be like, okay,
Yeah.
that's what I look like. That's what I sound like.
But you can
Just get
do
on with
it.
it.
Like this, so when this is what I learned when I was doing like a lot of the guild election interviews and stuff. So you go into the studio and you go, right, so this is the microphone. We talk into the microphone. These are the headphones. I'm going to put them on because I need to put them on because I'm checking the levels. But then you offer to people if you want to put them on, but be aware you're going to be able to hear your own voice through the headphones. And people hate that. When most of the interviews, people wouldn't put the headphones on because they're like, I don't want to hear it. Whereas for me now, I spend so much of my own time hearing my own voice when I'm playing, like editing stuff back, when I'm uploading it, when I'm checking that it sounds okay. I have to listen to the sound of my own voice. And then I've adapted to it now. Like at first, I hated it and I couldn't listen to anything that I did back. But now I'm absolutely fine with it. Because you just have to be, because the alternative is just cringing every time you try and do anything.
Or the worst alternative is you just don't do anything.
Yeah.
You become so scared and so freaked out by the sound of your own voice that you just don't give it a go.
Yeah. No, I think you have to just accept that it might not be the easiest thing to do, but it's a useful thing for us to be able to do. Yeah, I'm a big fan of it. Listening to my own voice, I would say I like it now these days. I think a lot of the time I say things quite well. You can be proud of what you've done in a lot of ways, which is nice. But not everyone can like the sound of their own voice.
No, they can't.
There are certain times it's bad as well. Like, it depends on what you've done. Some things are worse than others.
Like if you said like a bad joke or something cool.
Yeah, something cringe like that. Oh, God. That would send the shivers down the spine. But most of the time, it's fine. Yeah, most of the time, if I'm editing like in an X-Focus or a news hour, it's not that much of my own voice, right? Because the whole point is the panel is speaking. It's when I'm doing my own editing that there's literally just my voice. And then you always like find there's always certain words that you say and you realise you find yourself saying and you're like, God, why do I keep saying that one word? So for me, when I'm stuff, I often go now or like sure. Those are my two big words rather than necessarily which is a big pet peeve of mine when people say all the time, because I'm so conscious of it now because I've been doing radio. There are a couple of journalists I really like that say all the time and it really grinds my gears. But for me, I go now and I'll be like, now, this is what happened. Now. And I hate it. And then I will just cut it out when I'm editing. If it really gets on my nerves, I'll just cut it out because I can't hear it.
How long did it take for your voice to sort of become better over time, would you say?
I don't think I didn't notice a time when I was fine with it, but then I think my voice itself got better over time, as in like I got better at speaking on a microphone, more confident behind the microphone. I've always been someone who speaks really fast and I'm always having to be like conscious of slowing that down.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah, always so fast. It was the biggest thing when I did a lot of public speaking, debating and acting. Always the biggest thing was you need to slow down. So that's something that I've been able to do a lot better. I think on my own show, because I have an hour, right, to fill just by myself. I'm like, right, I have time. I can take my time and say things at a better pace. But I think my skills have gotten better as well.
Is that because you want to say so much? Or is that...
I don't necessarily think it's nervousness. I think it is just that I have a lot to say. And I also think you get really swept up. Like when you're getting really into it, when I'm getting really passionate, I'm going to speed up because I really care about what I'm speaking about and they're going a million miles an hour. But then you obviously have to take a step back because what's actually nice to listen to is stuff that's a little bit slower.
More like you can understand as well.
Yeah, and I think most of the time I don't have a typically strong accent, but when I've been at home a little bit longer, the Essex accent creeps back in, and I have to be very conscious to be like, no, don't always have to say it like that. Just say it normally. Don't have the accent because the accent not necessarily hard to understand, but it doesn't necessarily sound the best all the time.
What does an Essex accent sound like?
I mean, I was at home for Easter and I went to my friend's 21st and I got quite drunk. And like I sent a voice note to my extra friend. I was like, this is me sounding so Essex. So like, I'm really putting it on here, but this is Essex like babes. What do you mean? Made in Essex like Towie. That's the classic thing.
Was that always quite strong growing up, your accent?
So I'm from where they filmed The Only Way is Essex, pretty much. They like filmed it in my school, that kind of thing. So that's the Essex of people, like the Essex accent of people I went to school with. I don't have it because my parents don't have the Essex accent, being not from Essex. But it was when I was at school and around the people with the accent that you just pick it up because that's just what you do. You hear your peers and you reflect what your peers say. So I think when I'm around them a little bit more, but that's what it sounds like. But it's quite a well-known accent in a lot of ways, not necessarily for the good things.
I never noticed it from you.
I don't have it, no. Because when I'm here, I sound pretty normal. It's in a couple of words. Like, it's a couple of things that I would say that I notice it in. So, for example, like, I don't say shut up. I go sharp. Like, sharp is the Essex way of doing that. So it's the little things that you notice it in. But I don't have a particularly strong accent. But I do very much identify with being from Essex. Like, it's quite a strong, like, Essex has an identity, which I quite like, being from a place that has an identity, even if it's not necessarily a positive one.
How do you mean by identity?
I mean, the Essex stereotype of, like, the fake tan, the fake eyelashes, everyone works at beauticians or hairdressers, everyone has fake designer clothes type thing. I mean, that's not obviously the most positive thing. You know, the women are loud and brash and bossy and that kind of thing, which is obviously a very negative stereotype. But, like, Essex as a place has that identity, and I like being from Essex because you say, oh, I'm from Essex, and people, like, know what that means. If you say, oh, I'm from, like, well, no, actually here Surrey has a thing, but if you're like, oh, I'm from Buckinghamshire, like, what is Buckinghamshire? Like, it doesn't have an identity, it doesn't have, like, a history in the sense of, like, a cultural being, whereas the Essex girl specifically is a cultural phenomenon, which is very much in the mainstream.
Yeah,
like GC, the big GC, Gemma Collins.
Oh my
Does
god,
the most
Gemma
for Essex
Collins.
girls. Does the most for Essex girls.
Do you know, I've heard a lot of bad things about Gemma Collins from people that have worked with her as a runner. She's certainly a character, I think it's safe to say. Yeah,
she's from T.W.T, and I know that the one time, like, my friend was out for dinner and Gemma Collins was, like, at the same restaurant, because that's where I'm from in Essex. It's like you just see these people out and about, and it's quite funny. They literally filmed T.W.T at a pub I worked at. I don't work there anymore, but I worked there, like, year 13, first year of uni in the summer holidays, and they filmed T.W.T. It was really funny because they, like, shut the whole place down for it.
Really?
I mean, they, like, organised it, right, because it's staged, really staged, because they moved all the furniture around and they brought their own drinks. They didn't even have the drinks from our pub, so that goes to show, like, how fake it is. And I've got that inside scoop, which is quite fun.
An interesting story I heard about Gemma Collins was a runner was asked to buy a notebook for her.
Yeah.
But it has to be a specific type of notebook. It has to be a pink, fluffy notebook. And she would not accept anything else. And then they never could find it.
Yeah.
So I think she actually walked off set or stormed off set.
Yeah, I believe that.
She didn't get that.
What a diva. Yeah. No, I believe that very much. This is when you, like, see people in the industry and, like, you... Because obviously the media is such a big part of what in our entire lives, so that be journalism, or that would just be, like, TV and film. And, like, because it's such a big part in our lives, and a lot of the time it feels very distant from us. Like, that's their world, their famous celebrity people world, and then we, mere mortals, exist over here. And then when you have, like, that curtain pulled back, you're like, whoa, this is what it's actually like. So I was lucky enough to be able to go to Channel 4 News and be in the gallery when they were doing a Channel 4 News programme. One of the best experiences of my life. It was absolutely phenomenal. And I just had that experience. I was like, oh my God, like, this is the news. They are making the news right now. I'm here. It was with Alex Thompson, who's the chief reporter at Channel 4, massive journalist who's done loads of war zone reporting. I was like, oh my God, I'm in front of this guy. He was, like, literally in Ukraine and I'm here. And they, like, had Matt Fry, who's another Channel 4 news anchor, and they had him, and he was in Jerusalem because it was in Israel Gaza stuff, and I was like, oh my God, I'm sat here watching this stuff behind the scenes, and that was so cool, like, getting the behind the scenes thing.
When did you do that?
That was October. October of, like, the third year, so October 2023. It was really rogue how I got it. So Alex Thompson, the journalist, his son is one of my mum's patients, and he came in with his son, and, like, they got talking, and my mum was like, oh, my daughter really wants to be a journalist. And he was like, oh, like, give her my number. She can come and, like, shadow me and, like, come to a Channel 4 News thing, because he was really thankful of my mum and the treatment that she'd given his son. So, like, just because his son was my mum's patient, I literally got to go, which is kind of nuts.
Oh, I love those stories, though. The smallest things.
Because I don't have... The thing with journalism in the same will be with film and TV. A lot of people have the family connections, and that's their way in. And their dad, has been working in a film company for years, or their dad was a journalist, or their mum's been, like, in production. That's how they get in. I don't have those family connections, obviously, so it's about those little connections, and that little connection was my mum's patient type thing. But you've got to take advantage of them, obviously, when they come about. Like those opportunities, you have to be like, yep, I'm there. Like I had to travel home for it, obviously, to go to London, but I was like, well, I'm doing that. Like,
You something you just don't get another chance to do, really, do you?
no, and like it was literally like for me, I was sat there in the gallery and I was like, so this is what I want to do. I was sat there and I was like, damn, this is the kind of job I want to be doing in the future. And like seeing how they did everything and the stress and the pressure behind the scenes. So they had an Israeli government spokesperson they were interviewing, but just before he was about to go on air, they had to stop because he lost his connection because there was an air raid in Israel, right? Because they were being attacked by missiles by Hamas. So they had to then get the connection back, but then they got him back on the screen, but they couldn't hear him. So then everyone had to move and they were panicking about this interview that they couldn't get. Ah. And then I was just sat there in silence, just being like,
this is amazing.
Because I couldn't, because I obviously couldn't interrupt. I was like, oh my God, this is so cool, that, like dealing with this kind of scenario and stuff. Very inspiring.
It's a little bit of a shame, really, that the election is so late in our academic life, really, isn't it? Because we're moving on from ex-media.
Mega fuming. My first response yesterday was, are you kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me?
We could have had our own ex-media coverage.
Because Tom and I had plans, because Tom and I came into being heads of news this year thinking probably a general election. Because like the latest date it could have been was January 2025. We're like, well, odds on it could be when we're here. So we had lots of ideas that we obviously are not going to get to carry on through. But also the incoming head of news is not going to have the ability to put their ideas through because it's in July and no one's here. But I think we're talking about doing some special coverage maybe on Zoom, doing it digitally and then releasing it on podcasting platforms, I think is our plan. But obviously it has to be slightly different from what we were intending.
What were you initially intending?
I don't think we had nothing solid, but we wanted to do a lot of like specifically like local stuff, like about the Exeter race as well as other things. Because the national picture is great, but you can get interviews with like local candidates and stuff, and that's pretty great to have a chance. Also, because Ben Bradshaw is no longer standing as a new Labour candidate, so that brings something interesting when you've got a new person trying to break into this area. But the kind of overnight election coverage would have been really fun. But I mean, I'm just so annoyed that noise is happening when it is, because also so for the next like academic year I'm going to be news officer for the Student Radio Association.
Okay.
So I've been appointed for that role, so I was like, oh well, I get to do general election coverage across the entire Student Radio Association and we can do that kind of planning, whereas now we're going to be quite limited what we're going to be able to do given it's in July and no one is at their unis. But
so what do you do then within the SRE?
So there are different roles, and mine is one of like the admin roles. So I'm actually sharing this one. This is the first time I've ever done it. There are two of us at this role. So the news officer role, and it's about representing news radio within the SRA. So whether that be conference, organising news speakers, news workshops, making sure that there is news provision for people, running workshops for other student radio stations, having one of my big ideas is I would like to do interviews, organise interviews with maybe like someone from the Department of Education, someone from like the NUS, someone from like a higher education think tank, and like get these interviews and then distribute them to other stations to give them the chance to interview some big names, using the Student Radio Association as like the brand, as the big name to entice these people in, but then giving them out to different student radio stations for that experience. And I also want to help encourage other student radio stations to develop news teams, because not everyone has a news team at all. Not all of them have news teams that are as strong as ours. So I really want to work and use my experience from running news here to be like, look, this is how you could be running news at your student radio station.
Look what you can accomplish from something such a small idea. Yeah,
and then you can like bring it on and I just want to make sure, because I love the news and I love news radio, and I think everyone should have a chance to try if they do student radio.
Do you ever mention the fact that you won an award?
No, we've not gotten there yet. Yeah, news team. Well, actually, not even just news team of the year at the Amplify Awards. Tom and I were absolutely gassed. I mean, we were so happy.
What was it that you thought that won you that award? Did they really detail it, or was it just like the whole entire structure?
We've not had any feedback. Maybe we should ask for feedback and be like, what was it specifically? Because that would be interesting to know. But it was actually, this is quite funny. So Tom put together the entry for the award, and it was due the day after Guild Election Week. So like he had to rush it because we'd been so busy doing Guild Election Week coverage, but he was able to get it in with everything. I think it was just the sheer volume of stuff that we've done this year, and it's quite varied. So we have 2 panel shows a week. We have bulletins running every day. We have special coverage, whether that be some of our interviews, whether that be the Guild Election Week coverage, whether that be local election coverage. And the fact that we've had some difficulties with the news team this year, but we've been able to overcome. I mean, I don't know if Tom mentioned any of that in the entry, but like we put them in and we weren't necessarily expecting anything to come out of it, but it clearly did. And it was just like, oh my God. Like that was just the shock of it.
What was the feeling like? Was it like the SRA conference that we did last year?
Yeah, it was the same kind of thing.
Everyone sat down around tables.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I should say this. We had it on good authority that we were going to be winning something, because a source inside the SRA very forcefully told me and Tom to get tickets to come to conference, because I was quite reluctant because I had like this work to do. And this voice of the SRA was like, you and Tom need to be there. You really, really want to be there. So I was like, well, okay, you've told us to be there, so I'm going to go there now. So we had a bit of an expectation coming in, but we didn't know for sure. Like we'd not been given anything certain with certainty. So we were sat at the table and we'd put in for 2 entries. We didn't make the shortlist for Best Student Media Collaboration, which was the Guild Election one that we put in. We didn't make the shortlist for that. So we're like, right, well, the only other one we put in for was Team of the Year. So we were sat there and it was like the penultimate award that was given. And we were sat there and they did the shortlist. And Tom and I were sat there. We were like, oh my God. And then they like did the bronze and it wasn't us. And then they did the silver and it wasn't us. And then they did the gold and it was us. And literally we got up and I have the video of us doing it. It's hilarious because the first thing I go to do is I go up to go to the stage. The first thing Tom does is give me a hug, which is really nice. Like his first response was to like celebrate with me before we go up and give the speech and get the award.
So you're walking one way, he's going that way.
Well, I sort of had to walk around the table to him and to go up. But I was like, oh my God. And then we went up and gave like a little speech and got our big glass trophy that is now in the Expression studio, which looks great, and it's got the news team all over it, which is really fun. And it was just so amazing to be recognised for what we've done, because then we put so much into it, and the news team have put so much into this year, and it's so nice to see it paying off.
Do you think you carry that on to what you do your masters? Try and do another news team, or
I mean, I don't know if I'm.
Or is that something that you already do within your masters?
I do it within my course. I don't think I'm going to carry on doing student radio in the same way because I think I might be a little bit busy. But I would like to see. Cardiff's student radio station is called Express, so nice and similar to Expression FM. So I'd like to go see like what Express does and how they operate and things, because I'd just be curious. But I don't think I necessarily have time because my master's is like 9 to 5 every day type thing. Like it's
really?
intense. I have like I'm fully contact hours all the time. They're like there is no such thing as contact hours because you're just constantly having contact hours. So that would be interesting to see how that pans out.
And then after that, it's getting a job.
Yeah, a job. But I in wherever I can. Like whatever, I don't know, because my course is quite broad in the sense you learn radio, you learn TV, you learn social media stuff. So it'll be how what I like the most or what I think would be a beneficial skill to have and take on in the future. I mean, I'm quite interested in podcasting because that's increasingly a big area, especially in news journalism. You have all of these podcasts taking off, and I think it's a new area that's going to be very big.
Well, you obviously have massive experience.
Yeah, and I love doing it. So that would be an interesting thing to see how that one pans out.
Hopefully you and Tom stay in touch after.
We will. I'm going to come back and visit next year. I've already promised the news team that. I was like, I'm going to come back, I'm going to come on the show, and it's going to be really fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Good, you should. You really should do. Yeah.
Because I won't be that far away, really. Cardiff's only a train ride away. Not bad.
Yeah, it actually is quite close, isn't it?
It's actually, it's not too shabby.
Compared to where else you could be.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Love the Southwest. Big fan of the Southwest.
What other radio stations have you actually spoken to? Because when you do the SRAs, you still do quite a lot of networking, don't you? Really?
Yeah, so we spoke to quite a few people from Balrig, which is Lancaster's one. We spoke to some people from URN, so that's Nottingham. Also some people from Nottingham Trent's one, some people, because the conference this year was at Leeds, so the people from Leeds. So mostly quite a lot of the ones up north, really, because there are more universities up north there, but they have a lot of strong radio stations there. Worth having. It was a nice chats to have.
Yeah, it's similar to the TV stations that you have around.
Yeah.
Around the what is it? What am I trying to say? Around the UK.
Yeah.
There we go. A lot of the stuff they do is incredible.
Yeah,
there's
it's
one.
so lovely to see what they do.
There's one that does Univision, and they actually are able to make that a module that they do at university.
Whoa.
Which is insane.
That's so cool.
Imagine a student society having such, such high
impact.
Exactly, such high impact that is actually able to sway how a university does its modules and stuff, which is just it's brilliant.
And this is why things like the Student Radio Association and I don't know what yours is called, but like the Student Publication Association, that's why they're also valuable for that. These are the people that you're going to be working in the industry with in the future, like fingers crossed. So building those connections is really good.
Especially from early on.
Yeah. kind of people, because you see these people, especially at, like the news workshops and stuff, and I'll be like, hopefully, like we'll both be like at the BBC or Channel 4 or ITV in the coming years, and it'll be nice to like bump into
It'd
you.
be like that. It'd be like, hey, I know
Yeah,
you.
I know you.
I
Yeah,
know
I did
you
met you at a
from.
conference. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, radio
indeed.
has been a big part of my life. And that next week is over. God, I was literally preparing Joseph today, and I was like, I'm going to be crying so much. I was like, you're all going to have to give me like 10 minutes to give my speech. I haven't prepared it. Maybe I should write a speech. And I'll be like, and then I'm going to choose the last song, and we're all going to be okay with it. And I was like, we're all going to give me the time I need to be sad.
Do I get insight into what the song's going to be?
Well, there are a couple of songs that I associate with like leaving things behind. So the songs that I was quite a big fan of when I was leaving secondary school. So one of them is Places We Were Made by Maisie Peters, a little more by Katie Turner, and Little League by Conan Gray are all about like leaving the past behind
And moving on.
and moving on. So one of them maybe, or because we're big Taylor Swift fans at the news team, massive Taylor Swift fans, I might play Long Live by Taylor Swift, which is also like it goes like long live the memories we made type thing. So about the good times.
Are you going to see Taylor Swift live, or have you?
I am. I'm seeing her next month, coming up very quickly. I'm seeing her in Cardiff and Liverpool. So I've been twice.
Because she's playing at Anfield?
Yeah,
in
I'm going to Anfield.
That's insane.
I have quite good seats as well for that one.
I'm quite jealous, I'm not going to lie, because I'm being a Liverpool fan. I've never
Yeah.
actually been to Anfield myself.
No.
But I get to
I
hear.
get to go there, and it's for Taylor Swift. Yeah, it's going to be a good one.
It's like awkward stare, isn't it?
Welcome to radio. Silence, the best thing on radio. To be fair, I've not had to deal with much of it recently. Usually there's someone willing to feel it, the silence. Usually it's Joseph Terry.
Yeah, do you know what? I don't think the silence is always that bad, though, is it? Really?
No, well, silence can be powerful, like when it's deliberate. So, like, if it's a deliberate pause, powerful to let people soak something in. It's the same with debating. Sometimes you have to give a pause and wait. But it's when it's like, because no one's saying anything, and you're like, oh my God, gotta fill this quick. Or when something's gone wrong with the tech. That's the worst kind of silence.
Really? Like, what, just a technical error? Or
Yeah, so we had a couple of problems this year, but the internet crashed and the entire thing was just taken off air.
Oh.
Like, because the university's internet was a bit dumb and just wasn't working. So, like, we got taken off the air, like, multiple times in the space of a week. So that was silence, not a good type of silence.
No, that certainly isn't. And I remember that, actually, the network going down.
Yeah, and it impacted us really badly.
It's crazy to think how that happens, though. Really.
Yeah, no, and then there was a time that I was alone in the studio, completely by myself, and there was a power cut, literally just me alone, and I was doing Land of the Free, and luckily everything came back on after a little bit, but there was silence. Obviously, when the power was out, that wasn't good.
What was like the? You mentioned you do debating. Actually, I'm quite curious. What is the best debate you've had or done?
That's interesting.
Or one that comes to mind. You didn't have to be the best, because I feel like that's quite hard to categorize one.
Debate that I was like, God, I love debating. The first one I ever did, I actually won, was like a local debating competition between the local schools near where I'm from. And it was me and my debate partner. I was in year 10, she was in year 11. And it was about foreign aid budgets, and should we increase the foreign aid budget, or should we spend the money here at home? Where does charity begin type thing? And that was what like made me fall in love with debating and politics in a certain type of way. So that was good. I would say that like inspired me, and it made me feel really confident in what I could do. So that was really strong for me.
What was your argument for or against?
I can't remember. You get given them, you get assigned them. I think we were for increasing the foreign aid budget. I'm pretty sure that's what ours was. Yeah. I have a notebook that I take to every debate I've ever been to. So whether that be competitions, whether that be Model UN conferences, this notebook goes with me to every single debate. So I have all my notes from that first one. So if I had it, I could go back through it. But having that one notebook for me, it's actually quite nice to have it all in one place.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, I like it. And it has like, it's full of these memories and stuff. And it's literally lasted me from that debate in year 10 all the way up to now, like my final year of uni. I've literally kept it that long. And it's got all my notes and like speeches that I've stuck in, and like the notes when you pass between people, that kind of thing as well.
How do you organise your speeches? Is it more bullet points and then you sort of use that as a guideline to what you can...
So it depends what kind of debate you're doing. So British parliamentary is the classic kind of debate that the UK sees a lot of. You would write a speech, but you also would write points of information when you interject in other people's speeches and answer them, that kind of thing. But when I do Model UN stuff, I don't tend to script it. That tends to just be off the bat because you're speaking for a lot shorter amount of time. So it's easier to just have that flexibility. So there are different styles and they call for different things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever get involved in DebSoc while you were here?
No, I mean, I spoke at one of their debates as a guest speaker. So, you know, when they do their internals and they get like students in my second year when I was on committee for the Feminist Society, there was a debate, this house values freedom over equality. So I was on the equality side because Feminist Society. So I spoke at one of their debates then. But that's about as involved as I've been, because I've been busy with Model UN was sort of what I prioritised.
And what do you do within Model UN?
So Model UN is a style of debating in which you're not representing a specific view, you're representing a specific country. So what I like about Model UN is that there's a lot of grey area and nuance, right? Because no country is just black and white on any issue. It's all shades of grey. And that you can develop that foreign policy over time. So your topic will typically be, so I was at a conference last weekend, for example, one of the committees they did a NATO committee, and they were talking about cybersecurity and AI in NATO. So you'll have that topic, you'll have a country, you'll have to figure out what your country thinks about that, what your country has done in that area, what it wants to achieve, what it's willing to spend. And then you're representing that kind of view in debating. It's quite a strict, very regulated format of debate that when you're chaired. And then the other thing about Model UN is it's not all just speaking, you also have draft resolution writing. So as the actual UN writes resolutions, we also write resolutions. So you're coming up with possible things that you'd be like doing or like how you could address it. So whether that be new methods of funding, new international bodies, new areas of research you want to look into, you write those things as well. So it's a lot involved in it. Very, very involved.
Very involved, yeah.
Yeah.
And you even get to go to Germany.
Yeah, I was in Germany. Sick. Yeah, it was so fun.
What part of Germany was it?
I was in Konstanz, which is on the Swiss border. So I flew into Zurich and got the train over there. It was absolutely gorgeous, a stunning city. And the lake was beautiful.
How long were you there for? Was it like the week, wasn't it? Or was it a couple of days?
I flew out Thursday and I flew back on early on Thursday, late Monday. So I was there for a good, 5 days, really.
And was it just UN stuff? It wasn't like any, enjoying yourself sort of thing?
They have socials and stuff. It's because part of the conference there's a lot of socials. So I was chairing, so they had a chair social on the Thursday the night I arrived. And then they had a water sports social, so when I went paddleboarding, and then they had campfire, and then they always have a ball, usually on the Saturday, and so everyone gets dressed up, dancing. There was a ball, and then on the Sunday night, the night before I left, there was an after party. So there's a lot of time to have fun and meet lots of great people, which was nice. I literally had a message from one of them being like, we're getting our individual feedback notes from us being chairs, so who knows? I mean, I know I got really positive feedback, so I'll take that. I'll take that with me. Oh, it was nice. But there were a couple of people there that I'd met before and I hadn't seen in a year, so it was nice to catch up with those people.
That's nice.
Yeah. Connections.
Who have you actually seen, who's been your favourite person that's developed from expression?
Ooh.
Do you know what I mean? Because there's so many, you don't have to pick one maybe a couple mentions from how much you've seen them progress. Because obviously you've progressed yourself. But
yeah, and I've seen a lot of people. I would say Joseph Terry. We didn't necessarily always see eye to eye when we both first started. We used to disagree on some political things, and it's impressive how he's grown in his understanding and willingness to listen to others as well. He's really improved on those kind of skills, which makes you just a better speaker because you're always better when you listen. And obviously he's taken on so much and he's gone on to do amazing things. So Joseph, because I obviously knew him as a fresher last year doing radio, he's improved massively. The other one I would say is Tom Langley, because he was quite quiet when he'd be fine with me saying that. He was quite quiet when he came in. And he's developed in confidence, I would say, and also in his ability massively, especially with the tech stuff. He's really taken that on in an impressive way, in a way that I can't quite understand because I'm not that techie as he is. But yeah, those two have really, because I've seen them since they were freshers to how they are now. And I would say they've both grown quite a lot.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is Tom's now doing sound for, musical theatre. So.
Yeah, so he's clearly you've got developed these skills and everything like that, which is impressive.
And also he's going to be a station manager.
He's going to be station manager. Oh, what a year it's going to be next year. It's a shame I'm not here to see it, but I won't be that far away anyway, so it'll be fine.
Just trying to think, who left yet last year and who's leaving this year.
There's quite a few people gone. I mean, in my mind, I think there's quite a few people going.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, that sort of thing has influenced which has been my favourite year at uni.
Yeah.
And I think for me it would be my second year.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on your favourite year?
That's a good one. It would have to be 2 or 3. I was a bit all over the place in first year. You know, freedom from lockdown. Everyone goes a bit wild. I went a bit wild. And I also had a lot of finding myself to do. Cringe, but I had a lot of finding myself to do in my first year.
How did you do that?
Oh, I don't know. I think I just
Was it just trying new shit and
trying new
what
stuff
you didn't like?
and that kind of thing and adapting to uni life. So I would say maybe 2nd or 3rd year. I think 2nd and 3rd year have been good in different ways. So in 2nd year, I did maybe different things. So like I did a lot more at MUN. I did FemSoc. I was on those 2 committees. I did radio as well. I had good friends, and that was nice as well. But also this year, I've gotten closer with other friends and those friendships I really value very highly, and that I've really thrown myself into radio a lot more this year. So I would say maybe it's a tie between 2nd and 3rd year, but in different ways. They've been good in different ways.
It is always quite fun to see where you were in first year.
Oh God!
And see how
there
you
were
are
so many
leaving
people.
uni.
I'm so glad. Like the radio people, Expression Lops. So glad they didn't know me in first year, because first year me was a bit chaotic, and you know.
How so? I'm actually quite curious.
Well, I used to go out a lot, a lot more frequently than I have done in 2nd and 3rd year, and I was just a bit messy when I used to go out. In terms of clubbing and making out with so many random people. God, I used to do that all the time in first year, so much. So I don't do that anymore, which is a learning curve for me in that sense. But I was a little bit all over the place in that sense.
What were your go-to clubs?
Oh, back in the day, Cheesy Tuesdays. It was Unit 1.
Oh
It was
God.
Cheesies. I was a big fan of that back in the day. And also probably I've always been a big fan of the TP Silent Disco. I've gone to a lot of those over the years. Those tend to be, I wouldn't necessarily have the best memories associated with them, but I generally enjoy them as a night out.
Yeah. Do you think the clubbing scene in Cardiff is going to be good?
It'll be better, but I'm also not the biggest on clubbing anymore. Like I enjoyed it my first year, I've been in my 2nd year, but these days I'm less and less of a fan. I like going out clubbing, I just can't do it all the time.
No.
Like I'll go out clubbing once every so often, maybe once a month or something, and like save up all my club energy for like doing it. But
For that one night. Yeah.
But I can't do it as regular as I used to. I've not got that in me anymore.
I think it's just a part of getting older as well, isn't it?
Oh,
Your interests change quite a lot from going to places that are really loud and shouty to be able to sit in a restaurant and to talk with people.
Also, like I'm a bit of an early bird. I like to go to bed early, wake up early, and clubbing does not work well with that. No.
What would you class as early? Going to bed early, wake up
I go to bed
early?
like 10:30, 11. I'm asleep usually. Latest 11:30 usually. I mean, obviously that's not all the time. Like last night I went to bed at like 12, half 12, and then I'll usually wake up around 7:30.
That's good.
Yeah, I function best in the mornings. Like I do my best academic work and everything in the morning, so I had to be awake in the morning because that's when I'm at my best. And I like to make the most of my mornings and all that time I have.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to hear some people. Oh, there goes my alarm. It's quite interesting to hear.
Oh.
Holy shit. How quick has that gone?
That's literally flown by. This is me because I can literally talk forever and it goes by so fast.
It's quite interesting to hear how you have some students here who wake up at like 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock sort of thing. And
Mr. Thomas Langley.
Does he actually?
Tom Langley is a late waker. And
Tom!
There have been several times when, so for example, it's quite noticeable. So when we're hosting the shows, we're in charge of picking the topics and sending out the content calls. So my content calls, I've been up before 8 a.m. before because I was working, but my content calls will generally be up around 11 to 12. Tom Langley's content calls will come out at maybe 2, 3, 4 sometimes, pushing it because I'll be awake and I'll do it in the morning, or like I'll do it the day before. Whereas Tom Langley will wake up a little bit later, then have to do it then. Oh, I love it. And people work differently, right? And then people have different strengths and should be able to work differently. So that's why you need people who can do different things and work at different times. That's how a team works with different people.
Not everyone's a morning bird, early bird even. Some people prefer to work in the evenings.
Yeah, so. And I cannot work in the evenings. I do not function. Like if you're trying to get me to do academic work past 6, 7 p.m, you're not getting anything. You're not getting anything. Nothing good.
Nothing good. No. Well, Flo, it's thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Taking the time to come on.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad. We've had such a good conversation. We've covered a lot of ground, I would think.
We went from politics to Tom Langley to the SRAs.
to Tom Langley again. No, we've covered so much, and I think that's good.
Before you say our final goodbyes, where do you want people to find you on socials, if you want them to?
Yeah, so my Instagram, @florence.new. I'm going to be making a journalism account soon, so that will be linked to that at some point. And then also Twitter, because I'm trying to be a journalist on X. So that is Florence D New, because unfortunately Florence New was taken. So Florence Dean, you.
Flo, thank you again.
Thank you very much, Tom.